All right. Good evening. Welcome, no one, to the Lompoc City Council meeting, and could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Starbuck.
Present.
Councilmember Martner. Councilmember Costa.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Lingle.
Nope.
Councilmember Lingle. Present.
I'm sorry. It was Mayor Pro Tem Starbuck. Mayor John Lynn.
Is still here, yes. And let the record show that Councilmember Martner had indicated she would be coming into the meeting a little bit later. And we don't have anybody here for oral communications, so we'll open oral communications and we'll close oral communications. Now we've done that, and we will now go to the closed session in the utility conference room, number 1, conference with real property negotiators regarding 112 North H Street, city negotiators Laurel Barcelona, city administrator, and Joseph Pannoni, city attorney, negotiating parties, Steve Tabor, negotiating price in terms of payment. Councilmember Starbuck and I will not participate in that discussion because of our conflict. Number 2, we may take these out of order so Councilmember Martner can be involved in the first item. The second item will be conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to a subdivision of section 5456.91 matter regarding the wastewater treatment plant, and then the public employee performance evaluation of the city attorney, which has just been one long run on of getting to it. And it looks like we might get there tonight. So we'll see all of you at home in a bit. Okay, coming back from closed session, the city attorney will have a report because Councilmember Starbuck and I didn't participate in one item.
Yes, for items number 1 and 2, they were held and there's no reportable action, and item number 3 has been continued.
In other words, we ran out of time. And now, Pastor Hunt, come on down. Huh? I did. He gave his report.
All right, let's pray. God Almighty, we come to you tonight with thankfulness in our hearts. For God, you are good. I thank you for your care and love for us and all who dwell within this city. To that end, I ask you to lead and guide this council tonight and in the coming days, weeks, and months as they face many critical decisions. I ask that you give them strength when they feel used up and overcome, that you give them encouragement when they feel discouraged, and that you would grant them wisdom and insight when they have exhausted the limits of their understanding. Lord, please take care of this city, its residents, leaders, and caretakers. In your name we pray. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to report on a presentation I made last week. I presented a proclamation to Diane Szyminski on the occasion of her 21st birthday on January 28th at the New Life Christian Center. A large crowd gathered, a good time was had by all, and Diane was completely surprised. The entire town kept it secret, so good on all of you that were good secret keepers. Before we go to the city administrator's report, I think there were 2 things that council members needed to get out, an announcement while we have the maximum TV audience. Councilmember Lingle, you had one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity. I received an email today from the Santa Barbara Department of Health, and I think it's important that everyone gets this information. On, let's see, it's February 14th, the hours of 2 to 4 p.m. in the Vaughn's parking lot. We will have one of our city fire trucks there, and the city fire department will be demonstrating hands-only CPR. It's the newest and actually greatest form of CPR. There's no need for mouth-to-mouth, just simply hands-only. If citizens were to learn the simple technique of hands-only CPR, literally thousands of lives could be saved every year. So it takes 5 minutes to learn this. So if you can make it over there between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m., on Tuesday, February 14th, in front of Vaughn's. Look for the big red fire truck. You'll get a 5-minute demonstration. They'll teach you how to do hands-only CPR, and you literally could save a life. So please plan on attending. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I have two quick things. The first I wanted to mention is that there was a letter to the editor written in regards to term limits, and that letter referenced today as the date where that item would be discussed, which is correct. However, with the length of the agenda, it has actually been moved to the meeting of March 6th. So anybody interested in coming to discuss the item about term limits, please come to the meeting of March 6th. The second is a much less formal item, and that is this evening, my mother's watching, and it's her birthday, so happy birthday, Mom.
Councilmember Martner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess if we're making an announcement, I have a question, and this reminds me since I was looking at the future schedule items, and this is a question for the city administrator. There has been an item that has been outstanding for a while, and that is for the city staff to do a full report on LHCDC's status of the funding. We did have it as an agenda item. There was a contractor that was going to be hired. There is nothing scheduled into 2012 for this report to get back to us. So could you give us an update and tell us what's going on?
Councilmember Martner and Mayor and Council, we're in the process of securing a contractor to do the work, and this will come back to you in the future, and you will, that item will be reflected under future items.
Could we get a date?
I think it's safe to say in 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everybody else had a chance, so on behalf of my wife, the Chocoholics, the 25th annual Chocoholics Festival, the tickets look like this, they're $10 each, will be held Saturday, February 11th from 11 to 2 at the Grange Hall. And I don't remember who sold me these, but someone did. So don't miss your chance to come down and chocolate till you drop, I guess. And now the, Dirk, sure you want to say? Everybody else got something in. Well, I'm not selling anything. Oh, I'm not selling my tickets. I had to go chase those. Yeah, you know, there's one more we should talk about. Well, we'll get it when we get down to the Marks House issue, because they've got something coming up too. Okay, City Administrator's report.
Mr. Mayor and Council, while there are no status items tonight, I would like to just point out some of the items for future council meetings. The date, February 21st, the meeting. Mayor Lynn would like to give a presentation on the state of the city, and there's another presentation from the Santa Barbara County Housing Authority on renewable energy solar panel installations at the housing locations. And you'll see the code enforcement update in the meeting of the 21st as well. And as Councilmember Costa noted, on March 6th, the term limits for the mayor and council will be presented, and update on the AgWell report. I'd also like to note that today is my granddaughter's birthday as well, and happy birthday, Lola. Today she turns 6 years old.
And are there any staff requests and announcements? Yes, no, no. Okay. Oral communications. This is your 5 minutes to come and talk to us about anything. If the item is on the agenda and you can stay for the meeting, we would prefer to hear it when the agenda item comes up. If you can't stay or it's not on the agenda, come on down.
Thank you, Mayor. Honorable Council members, I'm Dulcie Sin, a community volunteer. And today I'm here to talk with you about a nonprofit that's a regional nonprofit that has formed in the past year. And there has been a lot of participation from City Hall, elected officials, and community individuals in this organization. And this is the Economic Alliance of Northern Santa Barbara County. And they have an excellent website, which is just econsbc.org, and a lot of our materials are being put on there. For those of you who have participated in the large group meetings, I want to report that we have been meeting in smaller team groups and are taking up the challenge of the 1,000-day roadmap to economic recovery that was put together by the people who are participating in the larger meetings, as well as the consultant who has been coming in and working on this. And what we're hoping to do now is to go into the individual communities and cities and hold public meetings, and we'd be glad to make a presentation for the elected officials if you'd like an official formal presentation. But we are going into smaller communities now, and those of us who are participating in our communities are doing public meetings. So we are going to be having a meeting here on February the 16th, and it's the same time as our Economic Development Committee, because the work that we're doing in our city should also link up to the work that we're doing regionally on economic development. So I've spoken with Teresa Gallivan, our staff and our Economic Development Director, and I'm sorry, I stumbled over that. And so what we've decided to do is on Thursday, we have a meeting that will begin at 4 o'clock and go to 8 p.m. And at 6 o'clock, we will, right before 6 o'clock, we'll take a break. This will be agendized for the public. We'll take a break, and then at 6 o'clock, we'll make about a half-hour presentation on what we're doing in the region for possibility thinking for bringing in potential and more prosperity. It's a very exciting program. A lot of people from our real estate, agriculture, wine industry, education industry, so many people are coming together and collaborating on putting this strategic plan together and are very dedicated to promoting our region and our communities as well as we can to maximize all the potential economic recovery we can have. So I hope to see you there, and if you have any questions, you can ask myself. Also, Al Walker's been very involved in our community, and of course, Teresa is up to date on what's going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next. Next.
Mayor Lynn, City Council, and members of the community. I am Kate Griffith, and I will comment on 3 items. First, I will correct allegations made by Mark Kargasaki about me as a planning commissioner and about my business, Flying Goat Cellars, at the January 3rd City Council meeting. Second, I will clarify the misrepresentation of my statements at the January 11 Planning Commission meeting made in Bo Portner's article. Third, I will illustrate the city's vague zoning ordinances, inconsistent processes, and arbitrary staff decisions through Flying Goat Cellars' experience. It seems that staff only reacts to the squeaky wheel, so now it's my turn to squeak. What will the city do about it? Regarding Mark Kargasaki, Kargasaki's oral complaints to council and subsequent media interviews reveal that he is mistaken with the history of his own complaints to the city, that he lacks knowledge about the zoning ordinance, and that he does not understand Flying Goat's business model. He is also misguided in his perceived conflict of interest with my roles as a planning commissioner and a wine business owner. Kargasaki claims 2 personally written complaints against Flying Goat in spring 2010 and September 2011, and alleges that another tasting room owner also filed a complaint. According to the city clerk, there have only been 2 written complaints filed against Flying Goat. Kargasaki's partner, Clinton Frolick, filed the first complaint in October 2009 and the second one in September 2011, Exhibits 1 through 3. Kargasaki alleged that I have received preferential treatment as a planning commissioner. Yet the first complaint filed by Frolick in 2009 was resolved when planning staff approved Flying Goat as compliant in February 2010. This was prior to my roles as either co-owner of Flying Goat and or planning commissioner. Regarding Frolick's second complaint in 2011, Flying Goat never received a letter of compliance. Kargasaki alleged that our entire tasting room, our entire space is a tasting room and office. Our primary uses are wholesaling and warehousing and storage. Our limited accessory uses of tasting area and desk area are within the 15% rule with less than 180 square feet. The ordinance does not restrict what we have on the walls, and his photos of our tasting room are bogus evidence. Kargasaki also alleged that we shipped from Vinegated Solutions, yet our fulfillment and shipping with UPS and GSO are done in-house. Mayor Lynn, who doubles as a city compliance watchdog, personally interrogated Vinegated and had it confirmed that we are not shipping there. Kargasaki alleged that Flying Goat is, quote, the only one, unquote, operating a tasting room without a CUP. 11 tasting rooms in the ghetto have been operating without a CUP, including Halama Wines owned by Mark Kargasaki. City Council member Ashley Costa also works for a tasting room that does not have a CUP, Exhibit 4. Why is city staff kowtowing to Kargasaki and Frolic, neither of whom live or pay property taxes in Lompoc? Ironically, Frolic is a Canadian citizen who has been non-compliant with U.S. Immigration and Homeland Security and is currently ineligible to return to the United States. Regarding Bo Portner, Editor Bo Portner did not attend the January 11 Planning Commission meeting, but he did misstate that I sought help from Commission colleagues in defending myself and my winery against a competitor's charges. At the meeting, I shared with colleagues my letter to the editor that had still not been published. Then I specifically directed 3 requests on the matter to planning staff, not planning commission. Number 1, for staff to provide the letter of compliance for Flying Goat that was referenced by the city attorney and city administrator at the January 3rd council meeting. Number 2, for staff to provide a public statement regarding the allegations of preferential treatment toward me for closure in that matter. And number 3, for staff to advise Flying Goat and me on the next course of action referenced by the city administrator at the January 3 council meeting. These requests were directed to staff in public because staff still had not communicated with Flying Goat regarding the second written complaint and or the oral complaint. Ironically, the following day, Flying Goat was sent a letter requesting another site inspection. Regarding the city, when planning staff finally sent Flying Goat a letter stating that we were non-compliant on January 25th, we submitted an application for a CUP on January 27th. I've learned from the Planning Division Project Status Report dated February 1 that Flying Goat's CUP is up for Planning Commission review on March 14th. Yet, Flying Goat has not been notified by planning staff on the matter. Last fall, Council approved an ordinance providing for the issuance of minor use permits in various zoning districts, including tasting rooms in industrial and business parks. Flying Goat offers the perfect opportunity to demonstrate to local wineries how easy and simple the process is, yet planning staff is sending us to the traditional time-consuming and costly CUP. Why are we being discriminated against?
Kate.
Thank you.
No, you can get a couple sentences in. I'm not cutting you off. Just try to wrap it up.
The city zoning ordinances have been discussed as broken for years. Now, Flying Goat's experience clearly illustrates the city's vague zoning ordinances, inconsistent processes, and arbitrary staff decisions. These practices threaten the city's most valuable resource, small business. How will the city remedy the problem? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Lynn, members of the City Council, and citizens of Lompoc. My name is Norman Yost. I'm the owner and winemaker of Flying Goat Cellars. I moved my wine business to the City of Lompoc in 2004 because of the cooler climate for wine storage, city-owned utilities, and business-friendly environment. Unfortunately, the so-called business-friendly environment has become challenging. I'm here to share with you my experience as a small business owner, the arbitrary decision process of the planning division that has added additional workload for me over the last 3 years. I know that I'm not alone here, and there are many other small businesses that share the struggles and challenges in working with the planning division. Beginning in 2008, I moved my production and storage from Presidio Winery to 1520 East Chestnut Court, Unit A. Then in early 2009, I began to utilize some of the floor space for wine tastings, along with production, wholesaling, and warehousing and storage. In the fall of 2009, I received from the planning division a letter stating that I had a complaint been filed against Flying Goat Cellars. The complaint dated October 9, 2009, was by Clinton Frolic of Halama Wines and stated that Flying Goat Cellars was utilizing more than 15% of the floor space for retail. Then, in February 2010, I was finally approved after multiple visits by the code enforcement and after submitting a detailed site map for the record, Kate Griffiths was not working for Flying Goat Cellars or sitting on the City Planning Commission at the time. Another complaint was filed on September 16, 2011 by Clinton Florlick stating that Flying Goat Cellars was non-compliant. This letter had a very threatening tone and accused my wife, Kate Griffith, of nepotism because of her position on the Planning Commission. For the record, Kate has always recused herself from voting on any issues related to the wine industry or the wine ghetto, as defined by the city attorney while sitting on as a planning commissioner. Once again, I submitted another site plan and it had a visit from code enforcement on November 28, 2011. Based on the taped minutes from the January 3, 2012 City Council meeting, we received an oral approval for compliance from the city administrator and the city attorney. Yet, to date, I still have not received written approval from the City Planning Commission. It was during the City Council meeting that Mark Kargasaki made a public statement that Flying Goat Cellars need to be investigated again and that my wife, Kate Griffith, is abusing her position for monetary gain with the City Planning Commission. The Planning Division sent a letter on January 12, 2012, stating that they needed to make another inspection. How many inspections does it take to satisfy the planning staff? I then set up our fifth inspection for the code enforcement. This time, planning manager Lucille Breeze was in attendance for the inspection. During a conversation with Ms. Breeze, she talked about the issue of perception and how it would be a factor in the final analysis. At this point, I knew that Ms. Breeze had already made up her mind that our space was non-compliant. And even though we had delineated the tasting room and desk area with chalk marks on the floor, the most interesting part was the follow-up letter only took 48 hours to arrive instead of 1 to 2 months. The Planning Division acted on behalf of Mr. Kargasaki's complaint in a very expeditious manner. After receiving the letter of noncompliance, we filed for a CUP application on January 27, 2012. To date, we have not received any letter stating the status of our application. Yet, the date of our CUP application, Planning Commission was reviewed. The date of our CUP application Planning Commission review has been set for March 14, 2012. The only way we knew this because Kate sits on the Planning Commission. Last fall, the City Council approved an MUP process specifically designed to fast-track tasting rooms through the planning process. Here's the perfect opportunity for the Planning Commission to utilize the MUP process with a CUP application. Instead, we now have to wait till March 14, 2012. I would like to add that I'm one of the few winemakers that owns his own home plus commercial production space here in town. I've made a big investment in this community financially. I don't see Mr. Frolick or Mr. Kargasaki owning a property or paying any property taxes. Like I said in the beginning, I was led to believe that Lompoc was a business-friendly community. I don't feel Flying Goat Cellars has received fair and equal treatment concerning this matter. How is the City Council going to remedy this matter?
Thank you. Are you going to provide a copy of that for us?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. Can't write that fast. Next.
Good evening again, Mayor, and Honorable Mayor, and council members. This time I've got my other hat on, one of the other ones. I'm president of the Lompoc Valley Women in Chambers of Commerce, and Mayor Lynn touched on our event, and we wanted to add to this a little bit. We are sponsoring the 25th Annual Chocoholics Festival on Saturday from 11 to 2 at the Grange Hall. And one of our members, Norma Kiraketti, was the founder of this event, and we are honoring her with a, well, I'm not going to say because she might be watching. So it's not money, Norma. Anyway, we are honoring her, but tickets are $10 in advance, and you can get tickets at the Chamber of Commerce, but it will be $12 at the door. And you get a boat, sort of like a hot dog boat, and you can fill it with all our wonderful homemade chocolates. Our members have been making chocolate all week, and we're sort of, up to here in chocolate. It's kind of fun. You get to lick your fingers once in a while. We also have a sweet shop and store. We're going to have some gift baskets raffled off in a chocolate cafe. We will serve coffee and milk with the chocolate, so you won't feel too bad. And we have entertainment also. So please, come out, support this. It is a benefit for our scholarship program. We give scholarships to reentering women who, single mothers and so on, who want to go back to college and finish up their degrees or something, and I think that's a very worthwhile cause. So if you want to get really high on chocolate, come out. It's really a lot of fun, and we've been working very hard. And it's Saturday, from 11 to 2 at the Grange Hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Good evening, Mayor and fellow council people. Since everybody's selling something tonight and doing this, I thought, okay, I'm not going to just sit there. As you know, Good Samaritan's coming before you tonight for some extra money, for some money to try and run the Marks House for a little bit longer. We also are having a Hearts for the Homeless benefit dinner on Valentine's Day. It's from 6 to 8 o'clock. At New Life Christian, where the warming center is, which is also an emergency shelter right now. Pastor Doug, if you haven't ever had one of his meals, you're in for a huge treat. And when I say huge, I mean lots of food. We're going to do some informational program. We have lots of wonderful things to raffle off, and I have tickets. So if you haven't gotten your wife or girlfriend or whatever a gift, $25. It's a really cheap way to go, and you'll have lots of fun. And I have tickets, so thank you.
You can catch me at the break. Okay. Anyone else?
I'm Ernest Curvin, an urban missionary, and I'm curious as to what is going on with the Bridge House. We have personally donated a lot to the Mark House in the way of food and etc. That they need, but I'm curious whether or not the city of Lompoc has received the paperwork for transferring the property in the Bridge House. Is there an answer to that, John?
Yes, sir. The Bridge House is actually going to be transferred to the county. And if you see me at the break, I'll give you the lady's phone number, and she'd be happy to chat with you.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I don't have an update from a week ago. So
all right. And the person that is very much interested in running it in a proper way is Kim Cowdrey, and she lives in the village and is well versed in these matters and a very devoted person. And she's applied, and I guess it's just a matter of time. But we have other people that have horror stories, but the books will be open and everyone will be able to be satisfied. And I have one person who is there when it was a church and etc., and he knows all of the details about the place, and I think it can be a real winner and standing out in that. Thank you very much.
Surely. Anyone else? Seeing no one rise, we'll close oral communications and come back to the council. Yes, Ashley. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I just wanted to clarify a statement that was made in the public as being correct and true. Kate Griffith did state that my employer, Learning Wine Company, has a tasting room in the Wine Ghetto, and we currently do not have a conditional use permit. And she didn't mention, of course, because anything about noncompliance, because we are compliant with the current 15%. And if the public takes any issue or has any concerns, they have the same right to file a complaint, just as has been done in this case. So I just wanted to clarify that as being correct, but that we are compliant. Thank you.
I think the clarification that I'll add on is that if you have less than 15% of your floor space, you're not required to have the permit. It's when your floor space exceeds 15% a month. Is that the correct City Attorney? Yes, thank you. Okay. Now, moving on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar, we have approval of the minutes, approval of for expenditure vouchers, item number 303507, which I will not vote on because it's a payment to Smitty's Towing. Amendment to number 1 to consultant services agreement number CS07P-1C, construction management and inspection services for the Lompoc Aquatic Center dehumidifier, and that is for the corporation that monitored the project on our behalf, not the construction of the facility. And then item 4, approve resolution number 5763 sub 12, uphold the appeal submitted by Tom Showalter of Pacific West Communities, Inc., the applicant of the Planning Commission determination of December 14th, 2010, denying a request to change the construction phasing of a previously approved development for a single phase to a 3-phase project. The project is located at 1420 East Ocean Avenue, parcel number 85150-17. Planning Commission file CUP 0805. Are there any items on here that a council member would like clarification or would like to pull? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I just had 2 edits to the minutes for City Clerk. The first edit on page 4 of 6, I was wondering if you could add a statement or 2, or a sentence, excuse me, or 2, in regards to the discussion that I was having with the applicant in regards to their previous project budget and history, and there was quite a bit of discussion about a comparison of those numbers. So if you could just use your interpretation of a sentence or 2 discussing that discussion that we had. And the second edit is on page 5 of 6. Councilmember Costa suggested meetings be held no more than 3 weeks in a row, and then if you could strike the rest of that sentence, please. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be abstaining from item number 4 concerning the Cypress project. Since I voted against it, I still disagree with the phasing, so I'll be abstaining from that vote.
Okay. So we'll take items 1, 2, and 3 first, and then we'll move on to item 4. If there's no other discussion, I would accept a motion.
So move.
Move items 1, 2, and 3.
Seconded.
And a second. Thank you. Is there any? Yes, with the edits. And is there any further discussion? No. Could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. And now with regard to item number 4, I would accept a motion, please.
So move.
And a second.
Second.
And is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 4-0-1. Okay. And the next one is a nomination for Judith Dale to the Lompoc Library Board of Trustees for a term ending on 1/20/15. And this is an appointment for the member of the Buellton City Council on the Library Board. And so I will so move that and request a second.
I'll go ahead and second it.
I guess I have a technical question regarding that. She was present at the joint meeting.
Yes.
She hasn't been appointed yet? But
She has not been appointed yet.
Well, I would like a clarification. She was part of the Board of Trustees. We conducted a public meeting, and my understanding is that she was a member, but I see now that she's actually just being nominated now, so I'd like to know why wasn't that disclosed at the time?
Mayor,
Ma'am.
she was a member.
Okay.
Her term ended the end of January, so it's just a continuation.
And
She
that's
is-
allowed to have somebody that is
She's
actually not a-
requested to continue until somebody's reappointed.
But she said it right.
Okay. I just needed clarification. It was a little surprising to see this nomination here and having spoke with the person, not that I have anything against it, but
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this item? And could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. I think my mic's off. Yeah, my mic's off. There we go. And that passes 5-0. Item number 6, I don't have any information to give to the council this time. As you'll recall, this item will continue to appear unless there's information. So if there's information, we can go ahead and be able to talk about it. And seeing no lights lit, we'll go to item number 7. Item number 7 of new business is ordinance number 1581, sub 12, amending section 3.48.010 to the Lompoc Municipal Code relating to claims against the city. And our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. This could be seen as a house cleaning measure, but it's an important house cleaning measure. Before a case occurred in 2009, pretty much all government entities believed that the state constitution and state rules required someone to, if someone was seeking a refund for a tax or wanted to challenge a fee that was being charged, they had to pay the fee and the tax before they could file a claim and then sue. When there was a recent case, as I said, in 2009 that arose out of the transit occupancy tax litigation that had occurred, and that litigation ended up saying that although the state and the county are covered by that provision of the state constitution and state law that says you have to pay first before you can sue, it doesn't apply to a city unless the city has a special ordinance that says you have to pay first before you can file a claim. So this ordinance basically establishes that.
Any questions? Okay, so this basically makes us parallel to the county and the state. Okay. And now I would open this for oral communications. Is there anyone out there that would like to talk about this item? Nope. Seeing no one rise, we'll come back. And is there any further discussion from the council? Nope. Okay. How about a motion? A motion.
so move.
And a second.
I'll second.
Okay. And any further discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. And the next one, item number 8, the continuance of the Domestic Violence Crimes Against Women Prevention Program by Chief Dabney. Chief.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, those of you here in the audience, and those of you watching at home. I wish I had a better occasion to be here, but here we go. The Lompoc City Council has clearly established the economic development as the #1 priority for our community. The council and city staff are making every effort to create an environment that invites new businesses and entrepreneurial investments within the city to grow the economic base, reduce unemployment, generate revenue to continue providing and enhance the delivery of services to the residents of our city. The second priority of the City Council agenda is public safety. However, I would submit to you that adequate police and fire staffing levels are intrinsically linked to economic development. When developers and entrepreneurs are searching out fertile ground for investment, they check the local crime rates, the crime prevention programs, traffic safety records, security of businesses and neighborhoods, and other factors such as insurance ratings that hinge upon the adequacy of police and fire protection services. To use a metaphor, any gardener will tell you that soil preparation and maintenance is critical to new growth. Just throwing seeds out on the ground and adding water may get you a flower or two, but it won't produce a bumper crop. The Lompoc Police Department has been actively engaged in pursuing our mandate to keep Lompoc safe by breaking the fallow ground of blight and extracting the weeds of crime that hinder economic growth. The department has aggressively sought grant opportunities to augment city resources to improve the delivery of police services and crime prevention resources to our community. One of those grants has come to a close and creates an opportunity for the city to make choices that can maintain an effective program and continue our efforts to maintain a safe, proactive community. So let's talk about the grant first. In 1997, the Lompoc Police Department obtained its first grant to provide enhanced services to the survivors of domestic violence. The grant provided funding to support an in-house victim advocate. In subsequent years, beginning in 1999 through 2011, the department applied for and received grant funding under the Federal Violence Against Women Act, also known as VAWA, to provide a full-time investigator dedicated to domestic violence and crimes committed against women, as well as an in-house victims advocate provided under contract with North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center. The residents of Lompoc have reaped the benefits of the specialized unit for over 12 years. So tonight I present you with two issues that face our city. The first is loss of funding for a police officer position, and the second is the provision of specialized services for survivors of domestic violence and crimes against women. So let's take the police officer first. The total complement of sworn officers for the Lompoc Police Department has been 51 for the past 5 years. This total includes all grant positions as well as those provided under the city general fund. During the 2011-2013 budget process, the decision was made to freeze 3 police officer positions. The department was prepared to make significant cuts to proactive enforcement and crime prevention services if these cuts came to pass. However, since we're so good at writing grants, in a stroke of good luck at the 11th hour, the city of Lompoc was informed that it would be receiving a federal grant that would fully fund 3 officers for a period of 3 years, beginning in October of 2011. Because of this grant, all existing services remained intact. When the department received word in late December that the California Emergency Management Agency was only providing VAWA funds for 8 agencies statewide and that Lompoc had not been selected for funding, it again placed the department in a position that required us to reassess our delivery of services. In 1996, when I came here, the department had 44 sworn officers, 42 of which were provided by the general fund. Over the years, we have tried to get ahead of the curve by aggressively seeking grants. In 2010, the Lompoc Police Department maintained 51 sworn positions, 44 of which were provided by the general fund. The federal cops hiring program grant that we wrote for those 3 officers was written with the intent to enhance the department's capabilities and push us toward the goal of 1.4 officers per thousand. This enhancement would have facilitated significant progress in addressing the crime issues facing our city. But with the 3 frozen positions, this grant allowed us to maintain status quo. So that's good. Not optimal, but good. At the close of 2011, 9 of our 51 sworn positions were supported by grants and funding sources other than the general fund. So As compared to 1996, when 42 of our sworn positions were general fund supported, we're at the same level today. The loss of the VAWA grant creates a situation, if left unaddressed, will result in the loss of a police officer position. If this previously grant-funded police officer position is lost, the sworn complement of the Lompoc Police Department will be reduced from 51 to 50, resulting in an officer-to-population ratio reduction of 1.2 per thousand to 1.7. And it also marks the beginning of a backward trend from our stated staffing goal of 1.4 officers per thousand that was supported by the Lompoc Public Safety Commission, the Lompoc Police Services Study of 2006, and the City Council's ad hoc committee recommendations of 2005. And our staff, as we meet, we feel that the Lompoc City Council should be provided the opportunity to prevent a reduction in the number of sworn officers serving our community. So the second issue is what the grant was for. Domestic violence is one of the most underreported crimes in our society. The Lompoc Police Department has been the only law enforcement agency on the Central Coast that has sought to address domestic violence through the use of an in-house victim advocate, coupled with an investigator dedicated to domestic violence and crimes against women. Through this specialized team, the department seeks to embolden survivors to come forward, holds offenders accountable for their violent acts, empowers survivors to avoid re-entering the cycle of violence, and creates a community environment that does not tolerate domestic violence or crimes against women by providing prevention and education programs across the community, as well as specialized training for officers, community-based organizations, and female residents. In your staff report, there are some statistics provided that speak to the activities of both the investigator and the advocate that is assigned to the specialized unit. And I just want to highlight that during the last 5 years, the average number of advocacy persons or survivors provided advocacy services was averaged at 399. 21% of those included secondary victims, and in our business, those are children. So 21% of the 400 are kids that are being given services by our victim advocate. An average of 1,026 different types of services were rendered, and these services range from counseling, emotional support, court assistance, restraining order assistance, crisis response, provision of shelter, transportation to and from court appearances, referrals to other community-based providers to mitigate trauma to survivors, and to support vigorous prosecution of offenders. And I know that Jerry Macbeth is here this evening, and he's probably going to bring a message from Joyce Studley talking about how important it is that our survivors and victims are taken care of through the process of prosecution. The victim advocate also supported the request of an average 183 restraining orders against offenders to protect victims per year. I might add that the advocate sometimes establishes such a great rapport with the victims and survivors that if they know that a violation of a restraining order is coming, like somebody's coming over to the house that shouldn't be there, they'll call the advocate before they call the police. So the advocate will relay that information to us rapidly, and we can prevent court order violations and recidivist violent acts. The victim advocate averages training for 182 people a year, and these run the gamut from women who have been battered, women who prevention classes such as self-defense classes. She's provided domestic violence recognition to medical professionals, to landlords, and other community-based organizations. She also has coordinated state-certified training for police officers and officers on Vandenberg Air Force Base, and deputies operating, and probation officers and deputies operating in our valley. Because our advocate Officers of the Lompoc Police Department and partner agencies operating here in the Lompoc Valley receive more training and have a more heightened awareness of domestic violence issues as they impact families in our community. As mentioned, the Lompoc Police Department is committed to keeping the crimes against women detective in the investigation section, even if it means reducing services elsewhere in the organization. But the loss of our in-house advocate creates a void that can't be filled with our existing staff. So grant funding is never designed to go on indefinitely. Granting authorities expect that their recipients will use grant funds to establish viable and effective programs, but then continue those programs after grant funding has been exhausted. Under this particular grant, the VAWA grant, the Lompoc Police Department, or the City of Lompoc, has benefited from over $1.5 million in grant funds since the inception of this grant. The domestic violent caseload has been reduced from over 400 cases when our population was about 8,000 persons left to 218 cases in 2011. But even still, that's 218 cases too many. Our community would not be well served if we lost ground now. So together with our community partners, broken lives can continue to be repaired, awareness raised, and the cycle of violence broken, and violent crime addressed in a proactive and preventive fashion. Now, we're not naive. We're painfully aware of the economic times that we are in, and of the desire to make, by you all and our staff, to make the employees of our city whole, eliminating furloughs and taking care of our people, because that's what we're called to do. However, I would be remiss in my responsibilities if I didn't make you aware of the loss of this domestic violence grant and provide you the options available at this point in time for your consideration. And you have before you several options. The first option, we'll call it the pie in the sky option. That's supposed to be funny. Thank you. Entails keeping things just like they are, fully funding the police detective, and fully funding continue our contract with North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center through the remainder of the budget cycle through June of 2013. And that does not come at a cheap price, but price tag on that is $245,000 and change. Option two, for all the reasons that I stated to you before, would be to just continue the funding. And I've broken for the officer, and the cost of that I've broken down into two segments. One is 6 months, and this report is written looking back to January 1st, so it's actually less than that. 6 months at $59,000, and then for the 2012-13 fiscal year, $118,000, and that's salary and benefits and everything combined. Option three that you have at your disposal is to create a city position that would establish under the job classification of community services officer a designated assignment as a victim advocacy, and the price tag on that for approximately 17 months if you run it forward from the time it would take to recruit is about $72,000. Option four is to continue the contract with North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center and retain the victim advocacy services through the 2013 budget. The department's intent would be to continue to support the victim advocacy program on down the road, whether it be through grant funding, outside funding, bake sales, or chocolate things with Anne Roget. And the cost on that is approximately $68,000, throwing in some contingency overtime. Since the writing of this, and I mentioned before that the North County Rape Crisis has been our partner for the past 9 years, but since the writing of this grant, Joy Studley from the DA's office has weighed in on this, and her victim witness coordinator, Megan Ryanschild, has submitted a proposal on behalf of the DA's office, Victims Witness Program, that they are offering to provide half of a full-time advocate, and the city would be required to pick up the other half of that advocate, and the price tag they put on that for through the 2011-2013 budget cycle is $82,616. There are some advantages to looking at that option. One is the vertical prosecution, the nexus with the DA's office. Some of the disadvantages are that it's $14,000 and change more in cost as compared to a community-based organization over the same period of time. And the other downside of that is that this proposed position is not one person but two. So there would be some break in consistency in terms of the cases. So in closing, the men and women of the Lompoc Police Department remain committed to serving the residents and businesses of our community with any and all tools that we are provided. We will continue to seek grants and other alternative funding sources to augment our resources. We recognize that the police play a crucial role in maintaining an environment that is ripe for economic development, and support the City Council on investing the city's limited resources in a manner that cultivates the best environment for growth of businesses and families in our community. I think that should the City Council choose to invest in this specialized unit, that being the investigator and the victim advocate, that this is a wise investment in our community that will promote healthy families and healthy neighborhoods for many years to come. So I'm available for any questions if you have them.
Chief, would you take just a moment and characterize our working relationship with our current provider, the North County Rape Crisis? As you and I have talked about this, and I'd like you to share with everybody what you shared with me.
Which part?
I think it was the good and wonderful part.
Yeah. Actually, and Richard Kravitz is here with us this evening from Domestic Violence Solutions. Over the years, we've had many opportunities. Our first stab at this in 1997, we tried to find our own, and that did not work so well. We're new to this. We didn't understand the intricacies of advocacy. So after that, we entered into an agreement with Domestic Violence Solutions and was with them for a number of years. And then in, I believe it was 2001 or 2, we entered into an agreement with North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center, and it's been absolutely wonderful. The advocate understands the needs of law enforcement, the needs for prosecution, what we need to take a case to court and to hold the offender accountable. And the advocate has been very effective in training officers on how to not be so black and white and how to look at survivors and victims as real human beings with children and with a family situation that is going to persist after the officer takes the report and leaves. So it's been a learning experience on both sides of the house. I believe that North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Service, they get the prosecution part of it, and I think that we get the compassion part that needs to take place to repair that family so that they can be productive in our community. So yeah, they've been a great partner, and in fact our former advocate is here with us this evening too.
And could you also talk about the resources that they bring to it because of their whole organization, rather than just we don't just have this one person, we have the resources of their organization? Well, actually, all of our partners that are here in the room with us, the DA's office, Domestic Violence Solutions, and North County Rape Crisis. I mean, I know that when there's money in the middle of the table, it's kind of like a poker match. Everybody's like reaching for it, but the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, if there's somebody in our community that's hurting, every one of these partners reaches out. Every one of these partners plays. And so Domestic Violence Solutions helps us with sheltering of survivors and victims.
North County Rape Crisis operates a crisis hotline. They support not only domestic violence, but victims of sexual assault, victims of child abuse. In a very recent child homicide case, the services of our advocate that actually, although she worked in our department and was there every day and looked like she was a member of the department, actually worked for North County Rape Crisis. Everybody thought she worked for us, but without her, some of the testimony that we got for that conviction would have not have occurred. So those are the types of intangibles that you just can't you can't put a price tag on them.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you for your presentation. I just have a few questions. The first is that last option that you gave us that wasn't in our staff report, the county DA option, let's
Correct.
say. $82,616, is that would be the city's portion, or that would be the entire portion that we would have to have?
That's the city's portion. Let me pull that up.
And is that for a sworn officer?
No, that's just for the advocate. That their proposal would be to provide the advocacy services, and that would be one FTE or 2 part-time people. And they broke it down into 20 months the first year, or 20 pay periods the first year, and 26 the second year. So they tried to make a swag as to when we could be back up and running as well. These numbers that I provided to you as the options, obviously the first two are based upon January 1, and we're already four pay periods into it or something like that, or 3 pay periods into that. So those numbers are obviously lower.
Okay, I do have 2 other questions. The other question I already know the answer to, but I wanted to make it clear for the public because I know I had a concern. In the conclusion of the staff report, there's a statement that the commission, the Public Safety Commission, that is unanimously supported sending the proposal to the City Council. And I wanted you to confirm as well for the public, my Public Safety Commissioner is here this evening and works for the North County Rape Crisis Center. I thought unanimously must have meant that she voted, but in fact, you confirmed that she recused herself from that vote. So that vote was actually
Correct.
a 4-0-1 vote.
Actually, it was a 3-1-1 vote. Yeah.
Okay.
The one commissioner was absent, and when it came time for this item for the Public Safety Commission, Commissioner McCarty recused herself. She did make a public statement as a private citizen, recused herself from the discussion and from the vote, and now that the minutes have not been adopted, we haven't had a meeting since the last meeting, so we'll have them amended before they're adopted.
So there was
there was a unanimous vote from the 3 members present. One member was absent, and your commissioner recused herself from the discussion and the vote.
Thank you, and thank you for taking this through the commission before it came here. I appreciate getting them involved in that. The last question that I have, and you may not be able to answer it, but it just came to me while we were discussing this, is option number 4, because it's not funding a city employee, it's actually a contract with a nonprofit. Have we looked into that $68,000 possibly being paid for through CDBG funds? Or have we only looked through general fund reserves?
I have not looked at it through CDBG funds.
Okay, I was just curious if that was something that we may want to...
That might be a question for the better-looking Brad Wilkie.
Thank you.
There's a caucus at the table over there. Go ahead. Better looking.
We were just talking between economic development and here, and the CDBG questions are much better answered by Donna Lockhart, and that has not been something that we've addressed with her. So Donna would be the one that we would have to talk to find out about that, if it's even a viable option. Yeah.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, first of all, I want to thank you for your presentation. It's been very thorough. And second, I want to thank you and your officers for allowing us to live in what I believe is the safest county in Santa Barbara County, and through your work and your officers. This obviously is a very important part of keeping this county or this city safe. So I'm glad you presented us with some options and you realize that finances are sort of a struggle for us. Earlier this evening, we met with the library board, and a shock to hear that actually 10% of the population of the United States cannot read. Shocking number. Obviously, we need to put money towards our libraries. Later this evening, we're going to be having requests for funds to help our homeless here in this community. So again, I appreciate you giving us some options here. Option number 3, $72,000. Is that salary and benefits or just salary? This will be a city employee for 17 months, and but doesn't state whether it's salary and benefits.
Yeah, that is salary and benefits for the job classification of community services officer.
Salary and benefits for a period of 17 months. Again, this 17 months starts January 1st then?
No, the 17 months is a kind of a guesstimate from where we're at now and where, how long it would take to recruit if we were going to do a city employee and put that person on staff.
Okay. And then the last question that I have, I'll probably have more after public comment, but since you, and again, I want to thank you for bringing this to the Public Safety Committee and getting their opinion on this. Did they have a preference as to 1 through 4, the options?
Each commissioner had a preference.
There were only 3, there's 4 options.
Yeah, each commissioner had a preference, and so the vote technically was that they support taking this to you as presenting all the options for your perusal. The support from the Public Safety Commission ranged from the full, give us an officer and the advocate to, just the advocate. But they didn't really wrangle with which option they wanted to recommend to you. They felt as though because they don't have the same 10,000-foot view of the city finances that you do, that they would leave that in your hands.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And now I'd like to invite the representative from the North. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I have a question that is kind of unsettling to me. Of course, option 1, I think, is an option that would be preferred by everybody in this room. No questions asked if we all had the money to do that. Option 2 and 3 sort of leave the Rape Crisis Center contract out of the picture.
Option 2?
Option 2 and 3.
Yes, option 2 and 3 would leave the contract with North County Rape Crisis out.
Right. Now, what does that do to that agency? And specifically, your relationship with that, meaning the department's relationship with that agency. You did speak that you do have a strong relationship, that what you have been doing with that agency is working very well. And even you mentioned we do things that actually don't have a price tag associated with it, that you couldn't pay enough money for it. So in light of those comments that you have made, is option 2 and option 3 viable to you as a department head, as somebody that is working in the department, that has this outside agency working with it? If you lose that agency, do you think that you can provide equal services if you had the monies?
Okay, I don't know if there's an easy answer to that question. Let me put it this way. Crimes against women and domestic violence involve a complex network of partners. For instance, a sexual assault may may result in what we call a SART exam, a sexual assault response team exam, which involve medical personnel, counselors, sometimes forensic examiners, and involves the hospital to a certain degree. It involves if we had a sexual assault, and even if we did not have the advocate position, I think that Shannon from North County Rape Crisis would chew me out if we didn't call them to come and be with that survivor through this process. So I guess the question you're asking is, do all these services cease to exist if we don't have an in-house advocate? The answer to that is no. However, their resources are also limited, so is Domestic Violence Solutions, and to some extent, actually the DA's office only has one victim witness coordinator assigned to their cases. So there's a shared response. Even if we have the advocate in-house, it's enhanced to a level that provides, let me put it this way. When you're training a young officer, you tell them that when we send you on a call, we want you to treat the citizen or the survivor or the victim the same way that you would expect your mom to be treated. And so going in that vein, the advocate provides us the resources to give that level of service that is caring and nurturing to bring that person back as a part, more readily as a part of our community, and to participate in the prosecution. Services don't cease to exist because that advocate is not there. They're just not as good. And it's catch as catch can, and as funding will allow. I know that both of our community partners, our nonprofits, have funding issues of their own, and I can't address those. You'd have to ask them. But they're both here.
Okay. I guess at one point in time I would like to ask that question, how adversely those agencies would be impacted if this council were to choose option 2 or 3.
I'm going to invite them up next.
Okay.
Thanks, Chief. And now I'd like to invite up the representative from the North County Rape Crisis, please.
Mayor?
Sir.
Just to follow up on that question from Councilmember Costa, Donna Lockhart did come in momentarily to give us some information. This would be something that would be eligible for the Human Services contribution process that actually closes this Friday, and they have about $100,000 that is distributed on a competitive basis. The Marks House is one of the entities that has gotten that in the past. Roughly $5,000 to $10,000 a year is awarded to the agencies that are eligible and apply and are awarded. So if this is a 2-year commitment, there would be 2 opportunities to apply to the Human Services Commission, probably somewhere around $10,000 a year.
Thank you. Come on down.
Hi, I'm Shannon Rose Chavez with the North County Rape Crisis. I'd like to first just say a little bit about the CDBG process, just because that was being talked about right now. There is a very limited amount of funding. It's about $100,000, as he said, and I think this year and last year, for the past few years at least, it's gone to fund between 15 and 20 agencies. So the average award that different agencies, including us, Domestic Violence Solutions, Marks House, a variety of other human service agencies, can range from $3,000 a year that is awarded to probably $20,000 is maybe the most that one particular agency might get. And so to look at adding this position into the mix of competing for that and thinking that you might be able to fund all of that advocacy position through that, I think it would be very difficult on all of the other human service agencies that do currently receive that funding. So I just wanted to put that out there. We have been supervising and employing the victim services advocate through our agency for the last 10 years. And the bottom line that I see is that it's a necessary position, whether it comes through our agency or through the city or through anywhere else. We have seen how important it is. We've seen how well the advocate works with witnesses, with victims, with people that are affected by these crimes. And we know that it works, just as Chief Dabney has seen that it works. Having said that, though, I also know that we have been providing that service and that supervision of that employee for the past 10 years. I think if you did go with another option, there would be somewhat of a learning curve involved and some training involved that would not have to occur if it continued through our agency. But again, bottom line is if you can fund that any way you can see it, I think that's the most important thing to do. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
If it were funded again through your agency, how long would you expect it would take to put someone in place?
It would take about 2 weeks because we have already actually started the process. Our interview process consists of a written interview, and then we narrow it down from the written interview to the oral interview. We've already completed the written interview, and depending on what the outcome is tonight, we are ready to start planning the oral interviews along with the representative from the police department. So, within a couple of weeks, we would have somebody in place. We also have training, 50 hours of training that we require of all new staff and all volunteers that go through our agency, and that is beginning the end of the month here in Lompoc. So they would immediately start into that very specific training for the center, but it also involves, all of the work that the victim services advocate would do as well.
I share your opinion on the limited nature of the CDBG funds and the fact that those are pretty heavily stressed now. So, Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we were to not award the contract to the Rape Crisis Center, what would be the financial impact to your organization? And would that mean that you would have to lay off an employee if that contract goes away, or would you just be able to continue your business?
We would be able to continue our business. We are, just like every other agency, we are facing some financial challenges this year, and we have had to create some staff furlough days through the end of the fiscal year. But this position, basically, it's a position, the majority of the funding that comes to us pays that person's salary and benefits. There's very little for administrative costs that's involved. So it would not be a big impact on us if it was not funded through us. And I think that would be the same with any other agency, hopefully, because the administrative costs should not be too high. That's how we're able to keep the costs down and how we have been able to keep it down through our partnership over the years with the police department.
But that would imply that the employee that is working on the contract would be a person that would be hired by the city if we go with one of the other options, right? I mean, I'm talking about the human side of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, the position is vacant right now.
The position is vacant right now.
Okay,
Yes.
That's
Yes.
where I had the disconnect. Okay, I understand the problem now.
Yeah,
The
that's why
position is
we've
vacant.
just started the recruitment, the interview
I
process.
understand. Okay, thank you.
Right. Otherwise, yeah, it would be letting someone go.
Could you share how that came to pass, just so everyone else knows what I know with regard to Cosetta?
Cosetta Blow has been the victim advocate here for about 6 or 7 years through our agency. And those of you who know her know what a great job she's done and what a great person she is. And I think part of it, a lot of this came from the uncertainty over the funding with this position that was coming up. And at the same time, there was a position that opened up on base that was similar in many ways to what she has done here. So she applied for that and got that position and went to that a couple of weeks ago, actually just a week ago. So at the time that we knew that was when we started the recruitment process.
Sad for us, happy for her.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's good for her.
Seeing no other council questions, I'd like to open this for public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't go away.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Richard Kravitz, and I'm the Executive Director of Domestic Violence Solutions for Santa Barbara County. I just have a couple of very brief comments. I want to point out to you that the cooperation and coordination of the response services in Lompoc is extraordinary. The way that the police department and the DA's office and the North County Rape Crisis Center and Domestic Violence Solutions respond it's almost a picture postcard. It's something that we're all very proud of, that you should be very proud of. But I want to highlight a couple of things that the chief said to you and ask you a question. How is it possible that the population of Lompoc has grown during a time when the sexual assaults and domestic violence calls have decreased? Why would that happen? The reason that that happens, I believe, and based largely on my communications with the chief, is that there has been a reduction in recidivism and there has been an increase in prevention. And this is just so wonderful that I can't help but come up and urge you to have the vision to invest in this type of community. In the event that we backtrack and reduce the level of services, and you see these numbers go up, you will have real and incalculable human costs, but you will also have measurable financial impacts. So to imagine that there wouldn't be associated costs, connected to failing to fund this position, I think is to make a mistake. And so I just wanted to urge you to, I'm not sure whether you're going to be in a position to make a decision this evening. I would love it if you simply felt that you were going to make a commitment to find a way to make this work. And between the DA's office and the community, I'm not sure how it could best be accomplished, but I think that it can be accomplished, although it might take a level of commitment that runs against certain of your financial insecurities. Thank you for all the support that you've shown to all of the survivors and all these agencies. It's a pleasure to be affiliated with all of you.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My boss, District Attorney Joyce Dudley, is in Washington, D.C. She's addressing the National District Attorneys Association, and she sends her regrets. My name is Gerald Macbeth. I'm the Senior Deputy District Attorney for the District Attorney's Office assigned to the Lompoc Valley. I am here on Ms. Dudley's behalf to read to you a letter that she has written on the issue of this victim advocate position. On behalf of the District Attorney's Office, I submit the following letter in support of the proposal set forth by Lompoc Police Chief Timothy Dabney. Specifically, our office supports the allocation of funding to cover the cost of maintaining a program advocate within their department. An advocate situated within the Lompoc Police Department is critical to the timely delivery of services to victims of crime within the Lompoc community. The advocate has provided an invaluable nexus between the victims of crime, the community resources, law enforcement, and the District Attorney's Office. Often victims and their family members are in a crisis immediately following a crime, and they require intensive support and services. The advocate is well situated to provide immediate crisis counseling, resource and referral counseling, safety planning, victim compensation, and emergency assistance, This support not only aids in the victim's recovery, but also enhances their ability to engage proactively in the care in the criminal justice system as an effective witness. And this is extremely important. I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to any of you here, but people don't like to testify. It's very uncomfortable on them, and to have the support of that victim advocate is extremely important. And I was just editing there and adding my own comment. Access to community resources, mental health, medical care, relocation, and emergency financial assistance can empower an individual and prevent re-victimization. Now, in addition, a well-informed and well-supported victim witness lends itself to successful criminal justice outcomes that ultimately enhance our community's public safety and well-being. Our office supports allocation of resources to continue the services afforded by the Domestic Violence and Crimes Against Women program and firmly believes that this position has been an invaluable asset to the Lompoc community. I want to add a few comments of my own here. I've worked with Cozy. I've been fortunate to be the attorney here in Lompoc for the last 10 years, and I can tell you that she has been absolutely invaluable to us and to the citizens of this community in preventing crime by helping get the witnesses to court, have them testify, and those are the things that help prevent crime in the future. Now, I have over 31 years of law enforcement experience here in Santa Barbara County, and that experience has led me to work with the majority of law enforcement agencies in the county. And again, I feel extremely fortunate that 10 of those years have been right here in Lompoc. I have a deep admiration and respect for the men and women of the Lompoc Police Department. They already do more with less resources than I would have imagined possible. They are a highly dedicated group of individuals, and they are invested in this community. I believe the most important function of government, from the federal to the local level, is to protect its citizens. A crime-free community is able to put its businesses and entrepreneurs in a position to provide the economic conditions that all of us need to succeed. In this light, I would ask you to maintain at a minimum the service levels that your police department needs and the citizens of the Lompoc Valley deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor?
Sir,
I want to ask
come on back. Can't get away that easy.
Darn it.
I'm sorry. Thank you for your report. And Ms. Dudley's recommending that we maintain an advocate position.
That's correct.
Okay. So now I'm going back to what the chief had mentioned, that I had written down as option number 5, where the district attorney's office was going to, Chief, you may want to step in on this, because I wasn't paying a real lot of attention at the time, but now I'm hearing it again. There's a portion of this advocate position that will be paid by the district attorney's office?
That's correct. The proposal is that the funding for the position be split.
Okay. And so, Chief, the $82,000, that's out of the city. So if I'm looking up here, option number 3 is a victim's advocate for $72,000. Now, if I were to combine option 3, a victim's advocate, and option 4 to continue the contract with the Rape Crisis Center, it's $140,000. Yet, if I'm looking at the option of splitting the cost of the victim's advocate, why is our cost $82,000 for that? What am I missing?
If I could read you the quote from the memorandum sent to me by Megan Reinschild, she puts it this way: total cost of a part-time 0.5 FTE, that's half of a person, victim witness program advocate with a salary and benefits is $46,700. So that's their annual cost of half of a victim advocate or half of a victim witness coordinator for the DA's office. So the next sentence reads, total cost through fiscal year 2013 is calculated at $82,616, which equals 20 pay periods in the 2011-12 fiscal year and 26 pay periods in the 2012-13 fiscal year. The district attorney will contribute 0.5 FTE for a total of 1 FTE. So they're estimating the cost for the 46 months at 82,000. I'm sorry, 46 pay periods at $82,616.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wilkie, I'm going to ask you to go to work real quick before the end of this discussion. If, and I'm not proposing this right now, but if I were to make a motion and we went with option 3 and 4, we'd have an advocate and continue the contract with the Rape Crisis Center. I'm looking at that at $140,000. But now if I take the option that the Chief just gave us and Ms. Dudley is proposing, which is a better deal for us, going with that proposal and option 5 or option 4, the district attorney's option or offer, and option 4, or if we just went with 3 and 4, which would be financially the better deal for us? You can calculate and come back to us in a few minutes. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
These questions for this witness? Or?
Well, I have a question regarding Councilmember Lingle's. Are you talking about option 5 plus 4 and then option 5 plus 3 to compare those two?
The difference between 5 and 4 or 3 and 4. Both would give us a victim's advocate. 3 gives us a victim's advocate,
yeah.
And 5 gives us a victim's advocate. 4 combined with either one of them would allow us to continue the contract. I'm just not sure which is the better deal.
Mayor Lynn, if I may.
Councilmember Costa.
Councilmember Lingle, I think the issue that I'm having with that is that that's a redundancy because the contract is for advocacy services versus a single victim advocate. So you would be doubling up, actually, I think even going beyond what we have now, if you had option 3 and 4 combined.
And
correct.
Let me step off this and let's finish with Chief. I'm sorry. Let me finish with public testimony, and then we'll come back. Anyone else out there? Come on down, Cozy. Welcome home.
Cosetta Blow. Good evening, Maryland Council, my community members that are in the audience and at home. So as you've heard, I held this position for about the past 7 years, and what an honor it was to hold that the position of the victim advocate. I feel personally, after holding the position, I know what a benefit it is to the community. No matter who does the work, I know because I get to see the result of what happens when an advocate is there from start to finish. It makes a huge difference. By the time sometimes you get the report and you contact the victim, if you wait too long, the victims by then are afraid, they've changed their mind for various reasons, very valid reasons, and it creates an issue. It creates an issue. They don't seek the help that they need, and we're pretty much guaranteed to get a call back in the near future, which is it depletes the resources of the department. So having an advocate in-house, you get that report that next day, sometimes the same day, and you contact that victim immediately, and you let them know that there's some support, that they're not alone. Often Domestic Violence Solutions has already had some contact with the victim upon the initial crisis, and this position partners closely daily with domestic violence solutions. If there is a sexual assault issue, whether it be an adult or a teenager, they partner very closely with the Rape Crisis Center. And so that is just an invaluable service to have in our community. I know I might be a little biased because it was me, but I can tell you, had this funding continued in the course that it had been, I definitely would have continued on in this position had I had that guarantee that that would happen, because the impact that it has on the community is just so great. Being there at the police department is such a unique position that we hold. I don't know if the council realizes that I go to conferences annually, and I always ask, I try to seek out people that are like me, that are actually stationed in a police department. I have yet in my 7 years to find one advocate that actually is stationed inside of their police department. Most advocates are co-located in a family resource center where officers go to them, versus the other way around. Advocates are very envious of my position when I go and I talk to them and I say, hey, I'm right there with my officer. And they said, we would die to be right there with our officers, because the relationship is different. Just like within your own families, the relationship becomes very different because the officer has that trust in you, that you know what their responsibilities are, and then you have that trust in them, that they trust and they know what your responsibilities are and that you've been trained effectively. So we share a different type of a bond, which really helps get the victims of services as best possible. And so this position, the conferences that I go to are national conferences annually in San Diego that deal with trauma. So it's people from all over the world that come, Hawaii, everywhere, and I still have yet to find anyone that holds this type of position. And so it is extremely unique and valuable position in our community. So I'm really hoping that you will consider funding this position in its entirety. I can't tell you how invaluable the link is between the advocate and the crimes against women's detective. I work very closely with that detective. We partner up. When he's having a difficult time reaching someone, he turns to me and says, hey, can you come out with me? Let's do a home visit. Let's see if we can get this victim on track. I really want to provide these services and make sure that the victim's okay. From taking pictures of victims' injuries and things, whatever it may be, that partnership is there and it's available, and victims feel so supported when they have an officer that's designated for them. It's not just that initial officer, but now they have a detective that's designated to help them through that process, at least the initial process, to get referred to the district attorney's office. And then I partner closely with the district attorney's office and their victim witness advocate, which there's only one of her as well. So she's overwhelmed. Oh, and I'm going over my time. So
you have free time. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just, the partnership is just amazing. I work with Sylvia in the victim witness office, and there is just one of her, and so she's greatly impacted in what she's already doing. So if we were to lose this position, I just don't know where the manpower would come to get the victims the services that they really need. Domestic Violence Solutions does a wonderful job, but they are limited with the staff availability here in Lompoc. They're doing the best they can to respond to all of our crises, but it's just difficult. Having that person, I can't tell you, have walk-ins all the time. People just come in and they want to see someone, they want to report something, or they want to get some advice before an actual crime happens where they need to get law enforcement involved. So thank you all for the support that you've given this position thus far and the consideration that you've given the Human Service Commission. I can't thank you guys enough for kind of mulling over the request and then approving it to be presented to the council. So thank you.
Thank you, Cazetta. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this?
Good evening, Mayor Lynn and City Council members. I'm actually coming to you, my name is Ann McCarty, I'm with the North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center, but I'm actually coming to you as Ann, the citizen of Lompoc. In October of 2010, I had the honor of graduating from the Lompoc Citizens Police Academy, and I've been working in this field since 1994, but it was the first time that I had had the opportunity to go through the 13-week course at the Lompoc Police Department and get really an inside look at what goes on, what the police officers deal with day to day, what the detectives deal with day to day. You know, I had my ideas, but to be able to infiltrate, so to speak, and have that time was amazing. And to be able to talk with the officers on a more personal level about the different jobs that they do, but also to hear them talk about the relationship that the client advocate has with everyone on the entire force. You know, I came into the Rape Crisis Center at a time where relationships were a little bit difficult, and it was that way all over the state. And I echo what Cozy says about going to conferences and talking with people that do not have a great relationship with their local police departments. But it's not that way with the Lompoc Police Department, and I attribute that to the administrative staff, I attribute that to the men and women who actually have their feet on the street, and I attribute it to the work that the client advocate has done over the year to empower officers to be better officers when they're dealing with survivors of violent crimes. Cozy is missed, there's no doubt there, but I know that we will find the right person to fill that spot. And we need it. We need it for the health of our department, and we need it for the health of our community. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you and show my support for the position, show my support for the police department, and to ask you to please fund the officer position as well as the victim advocate position. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Larry Ralston, captain with the Lompoc Police Department. And I have a unique perspective in my role with the police department. I spent the last 7 years of my career at a neighboring agency supervising and managing the investigation section of that agency. And during that time, one of my pet project, so to speak, was to develop a domestic violence program similar to what we had, or what we saw from the outside into Lompoc. And we made an attempt. We received a grant for a period of time, but we weren't able to fund an advocate inside our agency. And so we struggled through that, working closely with domestic violence solutions, with rape crisis, and the SART program to try to develop a viable program. Years later, I moved over here to this agency, and I stepped into an agency that had already figured this out. They had developed a program before that where they were able to use an advocate in-house, which is an ideal situation in a law enforcement environment, to be able to deal with the victims, the survivors of domestic violence and of sexual assault, and the worst of the worst types of crimes that occur that we see from a law enforcement perspective. Lompoc had it figured out. They were able to work closely with an in-house advocate. They were able to work closely with domestic violence solutions, with rape crisis, with the sexual assault response team. They had what every other city in the Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, and San Luis Obispo County have always wanted. This city has already done that, and they've got a great program. I've had the luxury and the honor of being able to be a part of that for the last 5 years. And it would be terrible for us as a community to take that and fragment that now. And I encourage you, do everything that you can in your power to try to keep that unity together, because it makes a difference to our citizens, it makes a difference to our law enforcement community, and to the different community-based organizations that are in this community that all work together now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Last chance. Come on down.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and council members and citizens. Well, Chief Dudley, you sold me at the very beginning of your presentation.
Mary, you got to say your name.
Yes, I'm Mary Saladino, a citizen of Lompoc. Sorry. I listened with interest to Chief Dudley's presentation as a citizen, and I was very pleased to discover that he has already a great proven program in place. It's already been proven successful, as also mentioned by other members who have spoken. So, Council, I urge you to find a way to continue the program for the benefit of families in our community, and also including those children and others who are victims or who have been victims. And I don't know if you're as busy as you are, if you had a chance to see the recent national news broadcast of a mother and two small children that were destroyed by domestic violence. And their deaths were very tragic. And people were aware of the situation, and agencies were trying to fix that problem. But when the children were brought to the home of the father, he was already prepared to destroy all evidence and himself and everything else. If you haven't seen that newscast, I hope you will see it. And I urge you to continue with this successful program. Safety in your community and for your citizens is your #1 responsibility as council members and mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one rise, we'll close oral communication. So I'm going to take a first slice of this because, Chief, you got to help me. The event we had in here a little while ago with the cutouts, I can't think of the name of it to save me.
Oh, the Candlelight Vigil.
Yes. You'd think I'd be able to remember that. Someone else was scheduled to speak, and they weren't able to come, and so they asked me to come and say a few words, and as I was sitting right over there, I was trying to think about what to say that would be meaningful, and I looked up, and there were 10 cutout silhouettes around this room. And the one that was closest to me was one of my customers. And her life was tragically ended in Santa Maria. But later on, something really important was pointed out to me. None of those silhouettes were from Lompoc. Not a single one. None. And that stuck with me. And the other thing that I kind of stuck with me tonight was that our population went up 20% and our crimes went down 50%. I don't know what that does in math. Brad could figure it out, but it's surely more than 50%. I wish we could do for gangs what we've done for this. The struggle always is about the dollars. And I don't think we can have everything that we lost, but I surely believe that we can have the victim advocate that we lost, who is the most key part of this. We have an organization that provides that person to us at what I consider to be a very reasonable fee that's successful, and perhaps even more importantly, because that organization provides that person, they're tied into that organization and then so many others in the valley. I'm not going to break my rule and make a motion because we haven't talked about it yet, but suffice it to say that's how I feel about it, and those are the reasons. And for those and so many more, I wish we could afford the detective, but I don't think I can do that in good conscience. And the chief has assured me they'll do what they always do, which is step up and make it happen. But if we have half as many cases as we used to have, it's got to be half as easy to make it happen. And I'm sorry, I don't know which one of you all turned your light on first. Okay. No? Okay, we'll go left to right. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question for Chief Dabney. I'd like to know the pros of option 3 versus option 4. Option 4 would be, and I have no doubt that we will have to fund, and we should fund, the advocate position. It's been, through all the oral comments that we heard here, is definitely something that this community is blessed to have, and to have had this police department, to have the foresight to have instituted this many years ago, whereas there are other communities out there that do not have that. So I thank you for that. So my question is right now, in your opinion, would the job be carried out better, perhaps, and I don't think better is really the right word. Would the job be more efficient if there was an advocate position created in-house as opposed to contracting it out with the Rape Crisis Center?
I can't tell. This is uncharted territory. And let me just tell you what our thinking was in presenting the options, and maybe at the same time answer your financial question, Councilmember Lingle. When I sat down with Mr. Wilkie, who said, good luck with this, and we discussed the different options, and at that time Cozy was still working with us and grappling with this opportunity that presented itself to her. It was a very good opportunity, and we support her and wish her well, and hope that we see her once in a while. But when when this first came up and we had to prepare this for presentation before the council, we looked at all potential options, and option 3 was floated as a potential for bringing the advocate position inside the city structure, so that maybe having a little more latitude in terms of types of cases being assigned, things like that. It was presented as an option, and was more of a question of, okay, what would it cost us to fund through the remainder of this budget cycle, and just put it down there as an option. And it's less about expertise, because we'd probably, if that was an option that was chosen, we'd probably hire somebody from either DVS or North County Rape Crisis Protection Center. So it's less about expertise as it is about just the nuts and bolts of management. And to answer Councilmember Lingle's original question, if you're looking for the dollar amounts, option 3, which is doing it in-house ourselves, is the most expensive option is the DA. Sorry, Jerry. That's $82,000 from where we stand today. The second most expensive is the city doing itself, and the most economical at this juncture is continuing our contract with North County Rape Crisis. So did I answer your question? I did not.
Well, you said I can't tell, and I don't really, I mean, you're talking about nuts and bolts and management efficiency of a position. You're basically saying that expertise and talent is probably going to be the same whether we go with one or the other.
Correct.
So basically what we're saying is that the $4,400 more that would be option 3 versus option 4 would be just the management in-house.
Correct. Basically the North County Rape Crisis proposal and the contract that was attached to the staff report, there's included about $4,000 for administrative costs for them. Our administrative costs are higher.
So then the question remains, is managing in-house a more efficient way to provide this service? Or will just going through Rape Crisis Center and not managing in-house, we will have the same effectiveness in providing the service?
I would say that the effectiveness level would be equivalent. With there are some intangibles, that's why I say I can't tell. Some of the intangibles are, and I'm sorry, Shannon, for not, we should probably go on a sidebar, but some of the things with their staff, they'll have to attend staff meetings at their agency, and because they're still a part of that agency. Changes that occur in that agency affect that employee, that then in fact affects the police department. So those are some of the intangibles that present option 3 as viable to us. When you talk to the command staff, that'd be the 2 captains or the detective sergeant assigned to supervise this unit, that's one of the things that they bring up, is that if you bring this under the umbrella of the city, it provides us more autonomy over management of the position. The downside of it, dare I say it out loud, is that now we're committed to a city staff person, and should there be some catastrophic financial event that occurs, that now we're talking about laying a person off from city staff as opposed to just terminating a contract with an outside agency. So that's ugly stuff that we really don't want to talk about, but that's the realities of life.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. I think the other point that should be made in regards to that is the obvious benefit, I think, for option 4 over option 3 is what you started out with, which was the interconnectedness, the resources of the North County Rape Crisis Center, and all that comes along with that position being included underneath their umbrella. Would you agree?
Yes, that's been our experience over the past 10 years.
Okay, now I do have a question for you. If we were to choose option 4, would that individual continue to work in an office within the police department?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then what I want, that's the only other question I have for you. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention is I bring up CDBG for the reason that many times when we're discussing budget, the more resources, of course, the better. So sometimes when you diversify those income sources, that can help with our decision making. So although I understand it wouldn't be $68,000, it is actually still currently is a potential funding source for this advocate position. And so that's why I wanted that discussion to be brought up. Now, what I want to say is that I understand the value of this. I truly, truly do. When you look at law enforcement, as we all know, it's about prevention, intervention, and suppression. This program really does all 3 things. And it's funny, in my little drawer, I have the thing that was given to me, was it last October? It says, Stop the Violence. I mean, this is outreach. This is prevention right here. So I know it's working, and I see that it's working, and I value that. The struggle that I have, of course, is that we're talking about general fund reserves. This is something that council did not want to touch during the budgetary cycle. Plain and simple. We still have employees on furlough. The library needs money. We didn't hire the 3 firefighters that we need. So therein lies the struggle. It's very difficult for me because our top 2 priorities are economic development and public safety. And I just said a few weeks back that the 2 are not mutually exclusive. So I'm really struggling here with what the right decision is. I do have to say, of the 5 options were presented, the only option I'm considering at this point is option 4. So I'd like to hear from the council and continue the discussion. Thank you.
You know, it took me 3 Chief Dabney Dare cards to get 1 Cosetta Blow card. I'm going to go ahead and draw a line in the sand here. In '96, you went from 44 officers to 51, an increase of 7. Since '86 to present, we've had a decrease of 7 firefighters currently right now. So I want everybody to realize that this is what we're talking about with public safety. There's another side on this coin. I really would not support option 1 or 2, a detective at $10,000 a month at this point. I think that I know the program works. I believe the statistics. I know Cosette. I've seen people that have been involved in this program. I think that it's very important that we maintain the advocate. And I really do believe that probably our best option to do that is with our neighbors across the street. You know, we've had this program going now for 15 years, and we didn't have a contingency in place for it. So now we're digging. And I think about as deep as I want to dig is to go ahead and fund a position with the North County Rape Crisis Center. And I think that's the position I'm going to take on this.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Option 3 and option 4. Option 3 is a city employee. Option 4 is a contract with the North County Rape Crisis Center. The city employee has annual leave, has sick days, and they're out of the office for that period of time. If we were to go with option 4, are we going to be without someone in personing that station for vacation times and sick time? Can anyone help me with that? The city employee will not be there during vacation time and sick time.
Correct.
If it's a contracted position, will the contract with North County Rape Crisis Center, will they staff 365 days a year?
I'm sorry, you have to come to the microphone.
Because unfortunately, crimes against humans don't wait for full staffing.
Our staff also, although we're not paid well, we do get holidays and sick time. So, you know, this position would take their holidays, their sick time as well. But there's always somebody on call through our agency that can respond. And I know that COSI, and I would imagine just based on the people that we are fortunate enough to hire, the commitment is to providing services and not letting it down, not letting the community down, not letting the victim down. So there would always be someone available to provide the service.
Even if it were option 3 that we chose?
I don't know which, I don't have that.
Option 3, I'm sorry, would be our staff, our city employees staffing the victim advocacy.
Well, I don't know. That would be different. It would be a different way of doing doing business. So I don't know exactly what that would look like. Yeah. Of course, we would not, sever ties with the police department or anything, but it would be a different way of doing it. So I don't know exactly what it would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Lingle, if I could clarify maybe and help with this response. Under our agreement previous agreement in the grant with North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center, we were billed for billable hours. So every quarter we'd receive a bill from North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center for the hours that were provided to the police department. So it's probably more appropriately to say that up to $68,000 is what we're looking at. And then option 3, as you're referring to as the city employee, you're correct that they would be leaves, different types of leaves that person, it would be a city employee and wouldn't touch North County Rape Crisis in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, so for clarification, with option 3, a city employee, there
Correct.
are periods of time that we will be without a victim's advocate.
Correct.
Okay. So then I'm going to look at my council members and ask you if that would be acceptable to you for a period of time, being without a victim's advocate if we go with option 3. In my opinion, it would not be acceptable. That's why I'm having trouble supporting option number 3.
Okay. So now I'm ready to make a motion.
I have a comment.
Oh, did I miss you guys? No, didn't you start?
I would like to make a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will go along with Councilmember Starbuck and support option 4. I think it is working and is doing a great service for the city, and I'm willing to take monies out of reserves to do this great service to the city because it is it is our number one priority. Call it economic development, call it public safety. It is what it is. And at this point in time, it looks that it's working, and it has been working great. So I don't see why we would want to change it. Don't fix something that is not broken. So I will fully support option 4. And I would like to make a motion if the council is ready for it.
Additional comments?
One more. Go ahead.
Thank you, Marilyn. Along that vein, again, I would agree that option 4 is what's been working, and it's a cost savings over option 3, so I'm not even sure why there's discussion between the two. Option 4 is the clear choice if we're choosing one. Now, I want to go back to this. This is only through 2013 budget cycle. So what then?
We'll be meeting with our community-based organization partners and also looking on the horizon for any grants or federal funding or private funding or foundation funding that during that time period.
Okay, and Mr. Wilkie, if you could briefly, an email was forwarded to us. It was a question posed by Councilmember Lingle to Mr. Wilkie, who it then got forwarded to all of us. And can you briefly describe some of the concerns that we're having in regards to revenues at this point?
I provided a brief summary of some of the known challenges that we have due mainly to the state. And some of those are mainly questions about when funds will be delivered. For instance, with the dissolution of the RDA, the city's general fund typically has received about $100,000 from the RDA as an eligible pass-through entity, just like school districts and the other districts. That should be coming to us, but there's a lot of uncertainty about when that might happen. So we have a budget item in 2011-12 for that amount, and also in 2012-13. I'm sure that will get worked out as we go along. The other two are, I was trying to weigh some of the positives that we've been getting. For instance, with sales tax, we've seen 2 consecutive quarters of 10% increases in sales tax receipts. We assume some level of increase in this year over last year. I think it was around 3.5% or 4%. I can't remember exactly what. But at 10%, we would probably be getting about $230,000 more than we got last year. I mentioned challenges with the state. The state at the last minute, around June 28th, decided to, in their way, they were trading one funding stream for another funding stream, but both of which are general fund revenues for the city. So they took away city VLF, vehicle license fees, and said that they were now COPS funding. But both of those are things that used to go to the general fund, and that action that they took was in direct violation of Prop 22. So if that works itself out, then that's not going to be much of an issue. But when that gets worked out, if it gets worked out, is something in the future. What the last item that I had mentioned is we receive a significant amount of property tax and sales tax in lieu monies from the state for various financial mechanisms that they've tried over the years to divert more money to them. We made an estimate for those during the budget cycle. We received the first installment of those in January, and based on that estimate from January for the full year, we're probably down about $133,000 from what we thought we would get on those 2 funding streams. These are not extreme reductions in revenues like we experienced in 2007, 2009. As you recall, our budget surplus in 10-11 was about $600,000. So we're not talking about large monies when we consider the $25 million budget that we have in the general fund. The $68,000 for the two-year cycle, $30,000 in the second year, $15,000 first year roughly. If we try to utilize some of the CDBG funding, that would minimize that even more over 2 years. That would be a fairly significant amount of reduction in the general fund costs. So I only pointed out some of the revenue shortfalls because we have a very well-defined expenditure side. So some of my expectation is that we'll be very, very close at the end of the year, end of the budget cycle, but we have some known uncertainties that hopefully will work themselves out over time, but I just wanted to point those things out that have already occurred. And we are making gains on sales tax. We are making gains on property tax. We are making small gains on TOTs. So I have a positive outlook on the fact that we will continue seeing those through our 2-year cycle.
Understood. Thank you for that. So again, just going back to the idea, what's the outlook here of our general fund status? And, it is still shaky. And understanding that with that COPS grant, we're going to have to fund 3 police officers in 3 years from now. Is that correct?
Well, this is the state COPS money as opposed to the federal COPS money that the chief was talking about earlier.
Correct. But even still, we'll have to fund those from the general fund in 3 years from now. And I'm just talking about additional costs that we're going to incur in the near future. Correct? Okay, so just with all of these things on the forefront, that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at this picture and whether we can fund this. Now, because I've set priorities with council and because I agreed on the top 2 priorities, I will agree to fund option 4 today, understanding that this only goes to 2013 and we do need a long-term contingency plan for this. I do see the value in our community, and I think that reserves are set aside for instances like this that occur throughout the year. So I will be in support of utilizing option number 4. Thank you.
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
You want to flip me for it? Go ahead. I get the second, though.
I would like to move that we provide funding to continue the contract with the North County Rape Crisis Center and retain victim advocacy services through the 2011-2013 budget cycle.
And I second. And is there any further discussion? Could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Thank you, one and all. Okay, now we're going to go to item number 9, developer impact fees for water and wastewater. This exciting information is brought to you by our senior administrative analyst, Susan Segovia.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk to you about impact fees for water and wastewater, specifically single, 2-family dwellings and townhouses. Okay, that's better. Thanks, Stacy. The City of Lompoc new development has to meet California state building standards and National Fire Protection Association requirements. Most of the city's current single-family developments have 5/8 inch by 3/4 inch and full 3/4 inch water meters without fire sprinkler systems. And the 2010 California Residential Code, Section 313, automatic fire sprinkler systems were required as of January 1st, 2011 for all new single-family, 2-family dwellings and townhouses. The code does require that the domestic water service systems add 5 gallons per minute to service the sprinkler system demand, and the 2010 Fire Code and the National Fire Protection Association 13D describe the requirement for water meter size when the fire sprinkler systems are installed in this type of residential development. City staff requires this development to submit water meter flow calculations to determine the size of the water meter needed to support the domestic use and the fire sprinkler requirements. The water and the wastewater impact fees for new development are based on water meter size, and most of the new single and two-family dwellings in the city should be able to use a full 3/4-inch water meter with sprinkler systems, and we have found that, unless the development has a lot of high water-using fixtures. Staff is recommending that water and wastewater impact fees for this development be based on water fixture calculations for domestic use only, because the water flow requirements from fire sprinklers would only occur during a rare situation like a fire. The new water sprinkler requirements do not affect, and I want to emphasize, do not affect water and wastewater rates, and there's no change in the monthly water and wastewater utility bills. Staff did work with developers in 2010 for potential new single and two-family dwellings and townhouses, and the only development that we found that we knew for sure was going to develop was Briar Creek. And Briar Creek did submit their single-family dwelling plans and get them approved in 2010, so they did not fall under the new requirement. They were told that any new development would have to comply with the 2011 requirement for fire sprinklers. This next slide just shows you how the different neighboring water agencies handle their impact fees. City of Santa Maria does exclude water fixtures for fire sprinklers. They just look at the domestic use. City of San Luis Obispo, they do not collect water impact fees. They look at domestic and fire requirements. Vandenberg Village Community Service District and Mission Hills Community Service District, they're under Santa Barbara County, and they include water fixture requirements for domestic and fire sprinklers. Staff does feel that the water and the wastewater impact fees for this new residential development should be based on domestic water fixture requirements only. And the example is that if the domestic water fixture calculations resulted in a 3/4-inch water meter, and the fire sprinkler requirement was the only factor that led to a larger meter, like a 1-inch, that then the dwelling would be charged impact fees based on a full 3/4-inch water meter. And the justification for this is that the impact fees for the water and the wastewater are based on system improvements, and you did see the picture in the first slide of the water treatment plant, also the wastewater treatment plant, that are needed, and this is used by new development. The requirement that the new single and two-family dwellings and townhouses include fire sprinklers would most likely just cause a negligible, almost non-existent increase in water usage. Of course, unless there was a fire, but that would be very small. Staff did discuss this recommendation at the Utility Commission meeting on January 9th, 2012. And the Commission unanimously did approve the following recommendation: that the water and the wastewater impact fees for single and two-family dwellings and townhouses be based on the water meter size requirement for domestic water use only, and this excludes any increase in the impact fees resulting from fire sprinklers. The city attorney also determined that this action does not trigger Proposition 218 requirements. Fiscal impact: there's no fiscal impact from the proposed language change for the water and the wastewater impact fees. And conclusion: staff recommends that the following language be included with the AB 1600 impact fee information concerning water and wastewater impact fees. Water and wastewater impact fees for single and two-family dwellings and townhouses will be based on the water meter size required for the domestic water fixture count, which does not include the fixture count needed for fire sprinklers. And staff is recommending to the City Council do the following. Authorize staff to add a notation to the city's water and wastewater impact fees for single and two-family dwellings and townhouses, so those fees will not be calculated based on meter sizes that are increased only due to the new requirement for fire sprinklers to be installed at the time those dwellings are constructed. I'm available for questions.
Are there any questions at this time? Seeing none, we'll open public comment. Is there anyone who'd like to talk to us about this? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll come back. Are there any questions from the council? Seeing none, I'd love a motion. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I move that the council authorize staff to add a notation to the city's water and wastewater impact fees for single and two-family dwellings and townhouses, so those fees will not be calculated based on meter sizes that are increased only due to the new requirement for fire sprinklers to be installed at the time those dwellings are constructed.
And a second.
I'll second it.
And is there any further discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Nice, concise report. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to item 10, the consideration of an additional $9,500 together with the previous reservation of $10,500 for a total of $20,000 for interim shelter services and $6,750 for emergency facility related costs, for a total allocation of $26,750 at the Marks House Transitional Shelter at 203 North N Street. And Dinah, there you are. And our Community Development Program Manager, Dinah Lockhart.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I'm here to present this report to you, and we are recommending that Council receive a recommendation from the Human Services Commission on a request from Good Samaritan Services for an additional $9,500, together with a previous Council-approved reservation of $10,500 for shelter services, for a total of $20,000 for interim shelter services at the Marks House Transitional Shelter for operations through June 30th, 2012. To consider approving an additional $6,750 for emergency facility-related cost, to authorize the appropriation of $26,750 from the Interim Shelter Services Fund CDBG program income for 2011-2012 fiscal year, and to provide direction to staff on further action. On December 6, 2012, Council approved a recommendation of the Human Services Commission to designate Good Samaritan Shelter Services, Good Samaritan, as an interim shelter provider for the Marks House Transitional Shelter. If the current operator no longer operated the shelter, the city had previously budgeted $10,500 for fiscal year 2011-12 for Lompoc shelter services from unspent Bridge House and Marks House operating funds. On January 12, 2012, the city was notified the Lompoc Housing and Community Development Corporation would cease operating the Bridge House and Marks House shelters. On January 17, 2012, the city received the executed Marks House deed in lieu from the Lompoc Housing Community Development Corporation, which transferred ownership of the property to the city. On January 20, 2012, Good Samaritan executed a memorandum of understanding with the city for $10,500 for interim shelter services at the Marks House from January 18, 2012 to March 31, 2012. Good Samaritan also informed the city additional city funds would be needed to extend the interim shelter operations period beyond March 31st, 2012. Good Samaritan has made emergency repairs and maintenance to the Marks House, including replacing the stove, the dishwasher, identifying and replacing the inoperable first floor heating unit, and cleaning existing flooring. Additionally, a lead-based paint test was conducted at the Marks House, including the 2 ancillary housing units on the Marks House property. A mold test will also need to be completed. The total of these immediate repair items and testing is estimated at $6,750. On January 25th, 2012, the Human Services Commission convened a special meeting to consider a request from Good Samaritan for additional funding for interim shelter services at the Marks House. After consideration of Good Samaritan's request, the Commission unanimously approved, recommending Council approve an additional $9,500 in shelter operating funds. That additional funding, together with the previously approved $10,500, brings the total city contribution for interim shelter services from January 18th, 2012 to June 30th, 2012 to $20,000. In summary, staff is recommending that Council approve the recommendation from the Human Services Commission for an additional $9,500 in funding, together with a previous Council-approved reservation of $10,500, for a total of $20,000 for interim shelter services at the Marks House through June 30th, 2012. Staff is also requesting Council approve $6,750 or sufficient funds as is necessary for emergency repairs, lead-based paint, and mold testing at the Marks House. The CDBG Program Income Fund has sufficient funds to meet this expenditure of $26,750 for shelter operations, immediate repairs, and testing. And with that, I conclude my staff report, and I believe that Co-Chairman Nemesio Balsina with the Human Services Commission is here this evening, as is also Sylvia Bernard, if you have additional questions.
Are there any questions for Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I believe this might be a question for Sylvia and Good Samaritan, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's let her have a say first.
Sure.
Sylvia, you want to come on down and give us your story? Thank you.
So this request, we actually, Good Samaritan went back and looked at a projected budget and what it would take to be able to run Marks House on an annual basis, and that included a full-time program manager and a half-time house manager, as you will. We also have a model of having a live-in staff person, and our proposed budget for the year was $90,000. We're estimating that it will take about $45,000 to $50,000 to run it for the end of this fiscal year. Good Samaritan has gone out and leveraged funds for this amount. This is not the entire amount that it takes to run these operations. We have gotten commitments from the county to the tune of $16,450 for Marks House, and we have also gotten commitments from the foundations. In fact, the Foundation Roundtable had a meeting with all the foundations in Santa Barbara, and I can't really give you the details of who's committed to what, but my understanding from Santa Barbara Foundation is that there's several foundations from Santa Barbara that are stepping up to support the Lompoc community. So we felt that it was only fair that we request $20,000 in total from the city for this fiscal year to be able to make sure that we can provide the staffing that's needed for those type of services.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. So as you stated, that was through June 30th of this year. And
Correct.
so this may be a question actually for our city attorney as well. Were you under the impression that at that time we would renegotiate to continue the interim contract?
Yes. And I'll be honest with you, when the RFQ came out from the city of Lompoc for, it was $78,000, I believe it was. Dinah could tell you the number. I've never responded to an RFQ and not had that money attached. So I was surprised that funding was not attached to the funding for Marks House. And then my understanding from city staff was that even though we had been selected as the interim shelter provider, that was the proposed budget on behalf of the city staff, and that the only funding they had set aside was $10,500. And so that obviously, there's huge gaps in that budget. So there will be renegotiation. I have been talking to city staff and to county staff. I think that there are some creative solutions. I think that there should definitely be some meetings that need to happen with HUD, and there needs to be a request for the funding that was lost. And I think that that can happen if Good Samaritan becomes the interim shelter provider for Bridge House. I think that's an easy conversation to have. The answer is already no now, so we wouldn't be losing anything. But I think that there are some things that we can do to leverage funds. But to be able to leverage funds on a long-term sustainable basis doesn't happen in 6 months. I mean, our agency runs on $2.5 million a year, but it's taken us years to be able to leverage veterans funding for homeless and leverage outside funding and be able to figure out how client fees can work. So it takes time to be able to build that. And so in the interim, we're going to need the support to be able to leverage those funds and be able to sustain the program.
And I'm under the impression that it takes approximately 90 days for us to put out an RFP for a full-time provider. Is that correct? Permanent. Yes, thank you. Permanent.
That's probably a reasonable. It'd be best to ask Dinah and Teresa, I think.
Approximately 90 days was sort of the time frame that was thrown around. So then what I would assume is that come March or so, we would actually put out the RFP for the permanent provider. Is that what the plan is at this point? Or is that not something that we've discussed at this point? Because I want to be sure, I know that it's going to take time to get that long-term plan, but if I was Good Samaritan, I wouldn't start that until I had the permanent contract. So for me, it makes sense that we put out an RFP for a permanent provider, whether it be Good Samaritan or not, in March, and then come the expiration of this contract in June, we'd be able to put in a permanent provider at that time. Does that sound about correct for staff, or am I off base on that?
I thought that was the plan.
Yeah, I believe that that's also what we're planning to do. I mean, this is kind of a changing situation, and obviously Good Samaritan is also feeling out what it's costing to run the program and the condition of the house and that type of thing. But yeah, I think that in March, I believe that Good Samaritan is also applying for human service funds for the Marks House now, and those funds would start July 1 through next June. So I think already Good Samaritan is sort of making plans that they would be operating the Marks House through next fiscal year, but we can certainly do an RFP to formalize that and make that more of a permanent rather than an interim shelter services contract.
Right. So again, permanent, not necessarily guaranteeing Good Samaritan that position, but that was the process we were going down. And the reason I wanted to say that was because that's really what I wanted to get into. Is we're talking about here until June, but that there is a long-term plan that's going to need to be formulated in the near future. So I'm trying to convince myself, this money's and what would it be used for, and to me it's sounding like it's needed. We need to keep the shelters open. We've already discussed that here on the dais. So I do have another question for Sylvia. Thank you, Dinah. I appreciate that. When I attended the Human Services Commission meeting, there was discussion of items that had been replaced. So it looks like the dishwasher had been replaced, a floor heating unit. So that would be about approximately $2,600. But there is this estimate here. And so I'm curious, if we were to give you an additional $2,600, would that cover the items that have already been purchased and placed in the Marks House?
My CFO is not here, but I believe so. My understanding is that I saw the invoice for the heating unit, and I think it was like $2,150. And then the dishwasher we got at Home Depot, and I didn't see the receipt for that, but I think it was like $300, something like that. On the stove, actually, Good Samaritan, we had one that had already been donated to us, and so we actually contributed that. And then all the labor we contributed as well. So I think that those costs are fair, and actually those upgrades are actually to the property that technically the city owns. So I think that needs to be considered that's separate. The other thing I just want to mention, because I'm really glad that you did bring up that point, is that we are the interim shelter provider, and the funders that support Good Samaritan, that are willing to fund this community with Good Samaritan running it, we have to be fair to them too. And so I think that to go through an RFP process is fair because they're investing in the provider at this point who's running it, and so that we need to be fair to them, that I don't want them to make long-term commitments if the provider should change, and I think that that needs to be considered along, across the board.
Okay, understood. And thank you for the clarification that this additional monies would only go through June of 2012. Thank you.
Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have a couple of questions, and I'd like to actually, before I ask the questions, I have the understanding that, yes, we were going to put out a permanent, an RFP for a permanent provider. And as the timeline dictates, that needs to be happening fairly soon, like next month. And then, Good Samaritan, as well as other organizations, will enter into that, competitive process. And at that time, there will be perhaps, some identification of funds and really a budget of how much it would cost to really run this facility on a yearly basis, on a permanent basis. But that takes me to there has been some testing on the lead base, and I've been asking for this, I think, over a year now, over the lead-based paint issue in the Marks house, and I've never gotten a straight answer, so I'd really like to thank whoever decided to do the testing, finally. But that takes to the point of you're going to do that. I believe, has the testing been done already?
Yes.
And do we have any results?
No, we don't.
Okay. Given that I would think that there will be some repairs that will have to be done, and lead-based painting repairs tend to be rather costly, because my understanding is that the Marks house did have these repairs in the past, and now they're failing, and now we need to move on into further repairs. That is something that certainly the interim agency won't be able to deal with, I assume. Is that correct?
No, they would not.
So what happens to the interim residents? I mean, what happens here? I mean,
well, I think it depends on the type of repairs, if any, that are needed. We don't know what repairs are needed at this point. So we don't know if there are any impacts, if any, on the residents. Okay. We don't have that information yet.
Okay, so my next question is actually to Sylvia. How many residents do you have in the Marks house right now?
Currently we have 4 women and we have 8 children, and we have had at least 4 other families that have inquired, but they have not been able to pass the drug test, so that hasn't happened for them. In addition, we have 1 family in waiting in Santa Maria in our family shelter that's straight from Lompoc, that is in our family transitional shelter that needs to come home, but we can't bring them home until it's a transitional shelter because they have a 1-year-old baby that we can't put on the street during the day. So that family's waiting until hopefully the whole process happens and Bridge House happens and it goes back to a transitional shelter. We do have 2 women that are coming in for interviews. They each have 1 child tomorrow. So we're pretty much at full capacity, and we should be at a waiting list by the end of the week. But we've agreed to keep the 1 family from Lompoc in Santa Maria until hopefully the Bridge House process is complete, and that we can transition the emergency shelter families that are at Mark's house now back to Bridge House, and then have that become a transitional shelter, because that's the agreement we had.
So the Marks house is not a transitional shelter right now?
No. At the last city council meeting, I had talked to the city council about having it run temporarily as an emergency shelter for homeless families, because the warming shelter is not a place for families at all at this point.
Okay, so the residents do have to leave during the day?
They do. Actually, 2 of them are enrolled in outpatient services with Good Samaritan at our other facility, and they have their children with them, so we've agreed to take them during the day. I think that City Council needs to know that the impacts of what's happened in Lompoc has impacted Good Samaritan greatly. I mean, we had 6 clients straight from the Lompoc shelter system show up in our emergency shelter system the very next day. So Santa Maria is overly impacted with Lompoc residents trying to get back here. And then as our programs are here, as we can accommodate them, we've been able to adjust them to try and fix this. But I'm hoping that with the Bridge House and the county coming up with some solutions hopefully soon, that all of it will be back resolved and it'll be easier to be able to handle. Because right now it's pretty stressful, and it's not a great place for the homeless to be right now. Gratefully, the Marks House is a safe place for families to be, but there are still families that are out on the street that are using, and they can't go to the warming center. So, it's problematic at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bernard, first of all, I want to thank you, Good Samaritan, and the City of Santa Maria for helping us out during this time of need. I think it's a good feeling that community comes together during a time like this, but thank you, Good Samaritan, and actually the City of Santa Maria as well. Looking ahead 6 months from now, I'm hoping, because at the council meeting several weeks ago, I expressed concern that the county may not fulfill their obligation to reopen the Bridge House. I still have this scary feeling that they may not. But let's assume they do, okay? Mm-hmm. How will the Marks House and the Bridge House then function? There was a specific purpose of the Marks House when it was opened. It was for women and children. Now we've opened it up for families. Mm-hmm. How will the two be different? My question eventually is going to be, can the City of Lompoc end up with one shelter, let's say the Bridge House, as our homeless shelter, and not the city supporting one, the county supporting the other? I mean, that's where I'm sort of going with this. But how do you see them being different 6 months from now if they were both be open?
I would see them going back to the initial purposes of what they were created for. I mean, Marks House is a transitional shelter for families. At one point, my understanding is that Marks House was open to having fathers in the process. At some point, it changed. Good Samaritan has a long history of providing services for families that include fathers, and so we haven't had an issue with that. That's why I proposed that we open that back up here. But the majority of the families are moms, and that is the reality of it. I would assume that Marks House is kind of the second phase, that first families and individuals that are homeless would show up at Bridge House, and they would get emergency shelter services, and then they would apply for transitional shelter like anyone else, and as would families that live in motels. Lompoc has the same situation that Santa Maria does. We have a lot of families, a lot of individuals living in motels throughout the city, and so that's not always the best place for families to live or homeless individuals. And so the process would be is that if you're homeless, you would first show up at the emergency shelter, or if you would qualify for Marks House, you could or apply for Marks House, and Marks House would serve as a transitional shelter up to 24 months where families could live and they stabilize their lives, they get jobs, they get back on their feet, they start going to school, the adults do, or whatever they need to do to get to self-sufficiency through intensive case management, and the goal would be ultimately that they move into permanent housing and go back into the community. For the emergency shelter, which is Bridge House, their goal would be within 90 days to be able to get to some kind of transitional or permanent housing. And that would be their goal at that point, and there'd also be intensive case management there as well.
Okay. The Bridge House, it has the one big building, which is big, almost like a big dormitory. Is it possible that that facility, and then the home set aside, it has bedrooms and everything upstairs, could that be combined into an emergency shelter, big dormitories, and then the transitional housing being the home? Is that a possibility sometime in the future?
I would assume so. To be honest with you, I've never been inside the building, either of them. But I've heard from people that have been there how it's configured. And, Councilwoman Costa had made a good point to me when we had left another meeting, and she had, put the scenario through, and we have the same issue in Santa Maria, but we have solutions for it. Here we don't. Is that she said, what would happen to a single female that has no children, that's homeless, that goes out and gets a job but can't afford housing, which happens all the time? Where would they go? Could they go to Marks House? No, they don't have kids. So where would someone like that go? So the concept could be either for families, or perhaps you have transitional housing for individuals. My experience here in Lompoc with the homeless, and I go to the warming center at least 2-3 times a week, and I've gotten to know some of them. There's a serious drug and alcohol issue amongst the homeless that are showing up at the warming center. I noticed that also the night that we were at Bridge House. And in order for people to get clean and sober, what do we tell them? You know, that it's one thing to go through our detox, it's one thing, and 80% of homeless individuals that are adults have drug and alcohol issues. We know that. So we tell them, don't hang out with the people you're hanging out with, right? But if you put them in a detox and you put them in a shelter system where people are using, then that's not good. But if you could put them in a clean and sober living environment, like a transitional shelter, then their chances of not relapsing are a lot higher. And their chances of really getting out of homelessness are much higher. And so I think that you're on the right track, that there's a lot of creativity, but I'm not sure what exactly is out there. I don't know what the configuration is. I don't know if the buildings are in good shape. But I think that having a shelter system, and I'll just be honest with you about my personal opinion, having a shelter system outside of the city limits with no access to services is not a good idea. I really don't think that the Bridge House is the ideal location for a homeless shelter for this community. And I don't know how Bridge House got to be that. I understand from the clients how problematic it is for them to get there. I've heard from a lot of community members that are not homeless that have expressed their concern about people walking across the highway in the dark, and it's very isolated. It's not the ideal location for people that are down and out to try and get back on their feet. Getting out there alone is a challenge. So I think that that's probably a conversation the city and the county need to have together.
I appreciate that. I agree with you. I cringe every time I see someone walking across that bridge. So, I think you share my concern is that I don't know where the money from both the county and the city is going to be coming from to support both these shelters. I mean, I'm going to be in favor of supporting this issue tonight, but it's going to be tough for the next year and two for both the county and the city. So. Anyway, well, thank you for everything you're doing.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Starbuck?
Yeah, real quick. So, I just wanted to say thank you. You always have the answers. I like it when you come prepared, I wanted to mention also that I was with Councilmember Costa during this Human Services Commission meeting. I want to say that the system worked. 2 of the commissioners are in this room right now. And I tell you, I'm fully going to support their recommendations on this as it stands right now. And I know that staff knows that they need to prepare an RFP.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. One quick question and then a statement. The question is, as the Marks House is run right now, the one confusion I have is it nobody's allowed to stay during the day as it stands now, and that's how it'll continue? That'll be the model?
No. Once Bridge House reopens, it will be a transitional shelter. They can stay during the day.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm that. And Councilmember Starbuck, although I agree with you to uphold the Commission's recommendation after we get some public comment, the one thing that staff added was for the capital expenses, and so I'm curious what council's thinking is behind that $6,750. I definitely think we need to repay for that $2,600 because those are items that were placed into the property that we now own. But I was not sure what everybody thought about that $4,150.
Thank you. Okay. So now we'll open it to public comment. Is there anyone out there that would like to speak to this subject? Going once? Going twice? There he comes. I knew there was one. Come on down. Tell us your name.
Nemesio Belsina. I'm the co-chair for the Lompoc Human Services Commission. I haven't anything to add to Mrs. Lockhart's report, which I deem is very comprehensive and complete. I do have some comments, and there's probably going to be some redundancy to what's already been said, but I'd like to be able to capture some of the spirit that transacted on January 25th. We did have a special session. We did meet with our representatives from Good Samaritan. There was only one agenda item to review and discuss, and that was the request from Good Samaritan for additional funding of $9,500. It is the understanding of the Commission that these funds will be earmarked solely for the operational expenses at Mark's House. Funding would also extend services to the end of 2011-2012 fiscal year. The outcome of the meeting resulted in the commissioners voting unanimously in support of Good Samaritan's request. With that said, on behalf of the commissioners, I would like to respectfully submit the commission's recommendation to council. We request council to also support, approve, and allocate the requested funding of $9,500 for operational expenses at the Marks House. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Carol Benham, Lompoc resident. I'm also a member of the Lompoc Human Services Commission. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I would like to second the appreciation that's been expressed for Good Samaritan. They stepped up very quickly. This was not an orderly transition process through no fault of Good Samaritans. They've been incredible. Thank you. I also would like to point out to the community, because I'm hearing a lot of different statements, concerns, misinformation. The only new information, the only new funds that the Human Services Commission requested the council approve was the $9,500. The $10,500 were funds previously allocated but not dispersed because the prior operator was no longer eligible to receive city funds. So I just would like to reiterate, really, for the community at home listening, for the audience, I know all of you know it, no one has recommended that any funds from our general funds be used for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Benham, that's what I was going to ask real quick. If you could clarify that this is not coming out of general fund, this is very specific money, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that.
Yes. The CDBG funds and human service funds are available to give to nonprofits. Through each year, the Human Service Commission makes recommendations. The prior funds reserved, allocated for Bridge House and Marks House could not be dispersed because the operator wasn't eligible. That's what those $10,500, those funds simply represent funds already allocated. They're not new. It's not another draw upon the CDBG funds. The $9,500 is, in fact, an additional draw that wasn't previously allocated. The Human Services Commission clearly felt, because of the circumstances, the difficulties, the chaos, and a number of other things, this was funds well spent by the City Council to keep Marks House going. And I again commend Good Samaritan in less than a week they were up and running with no prior notice. The only thing I might just add, and thank you for asking that question, Council Member, is I did hear from you all may already know this, the Santa Barbara County does not have keys to the Bridge House. They do not have the keys. They were allowed to visit a couple of days ago, but they don't have the keys. That process is really still at preliminary stages, apparently. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Seeing no one, do you want to talk about something before I close oral communication?
I just wanted to see if, and Ms. Benham said it all, that the county was behind the city in their negotiations.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll close oral communications. We'll come back to the council, and I think the one question that comes to mind from this is, Dinah, with regard to the 6,000, whatever it turns out to be, that's a reimbursement basis for actual expenses, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so we own the building. The building requires some maintenance for it to be usable, and we're going to reimburse them for those things that we've agreed need to be done.
That's correct, Mayor. Just to clarify, the heating unit and the dishwasher, those were items and expenses that Good Samaritan incurred, so they will be reimbursed for it. The testing-related expenses of $4,150, those are expenses the city has incurred or will incur. So just to separate that.
Thank you. But at the end of the day, they're all to maintain the building we own.
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Martner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I wanted to make a comment regarding that, the lead-based paint. We own the building right now, so we're responsible for the exposure, if there is any exposure of lead paint to those residents. So I think it is only our duty and our responsibility to address the issue if there is an issue. So I totally, fully agree to do the testing and spend that money, period. I mean, it is our responsibility now. Before, it was a responsibility of the previous property owner. But having said that, that's one aspect of it. Also, as I remember how all the funding occurred for the Marks House, there is a responsibility that we have to HUD, that we have to provide services in an environment that is lead-free, and if we don't, we're in not compliance with the regulations of where the funds came from. Mm-hmm. So we have to do it, period. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, just one final comment from me is, Good Sam, thanks for not charging us for the stove on this, and don't let the kids chew on the walls until we get the results.
Good advice always. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn, and thank you for asking the question in that way. Thank you for the clarification. That was the one thing I was unsure of in regards to the $6,750. So now that I understand that, $2,600 will be immediately reimbursed and the other is part of our responsibility, I agree that that's something that needs to be added as a cost. So I would like to make a motion that the council receive a recommendation from the Human Services Commission on a request from Good Samaritan Shelter Services for an additional $9,500, together with the previous council-approved reservation of $10,500 for shelter services, for a total of $20,000 for interim shelter services at the Marks House Transitional Shelter for operations through June 30th, 2012, and approve an additional $6,750 for emergency facility-related costs, and authorize the appropriation of $26,750 from account 43853-59209, Interim Shelter Services, CDBG Program Income for the 2011-2013 fiscal year.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any? Councilmember Lingle.
Just a little correction on the motion. The motion is 2011-2012 fiscal year, not 13.
No, it says 11-13 down on the bottom.
No, it says 12.
It should be 11-12.
Okay, I'm on the agenda.
Okay.
You're on the sheet. Okay.
So just that correction, 2012.
Typo. Okay. And any other questions? And seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Thank you. And written communications? None. Oral communications? Anyone out there want 2 more minutes? Seeing no one rise, we'll close that. Council requests, comments, and meeting reports. I have one report I need to make. I attended the Northern California Power Agency, and all of my expenses there were covered by the NCPA, plus I hitchhiked with Bob. However, I did learn while I was in Sacramento that the wine show, which is the industry show of stuff, was going on at the convention center, so you all paid for me to get in there because Bob was the voting delegate. And I went over and hustled up a bunch of good information to bring back for our wineries, which I haven't gotten to pass out yet, but later this week. I attended a number of other meetings, and there were no expenses to the city. Start from the right, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also attended the Northern California Power administration meeting in Sacramento. My expenses were paid for with the exception of mileage. I drove my personal vehicle and the city reimbursed me for the mileage. And I do have I have actually two requests. One of the things I learned at the meeting in Sacramento was that the Northern California Power Agency is doing a fantastic job. They're doing such a great job that our budgeted amount that we budgeted based on the NCPA's budget that we were going to be paying NCPA is significantly lower. The amount that we're paying them is significantly lower for this budget year. We are saving a good amount of money. So what I'd like to do is request that we ask staff to look at possibly foregoing with the proposed utility increase due in July of this year. I believe we are saving enough money that we can either delay it, postpone it, or eliminate it. That'll be a 3% scheduled for July of 2012. So I'd like to recommend that we get a staff report seeing if that is actually feasible. We've been saving upwards of, or our expenses have been upwards of in excess of $100,000 during a monthly period. So there might be some money available. The other thing I'd like to request, and this could just be a written request, it doesn't have to be a formal report. Well, let's take that one first. I'll need that one first.
Yeah, and I attended the same meeting and I heard the same things Bob heard, and I agree we should look at that. And just so you know, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. They told us that the current proven reserves and drilled natural gas in the United States are good for the next 500 years.
Something like that.
Yeah. And that has driven down the price of natural gas, which has then driven down the price of generation. In July, the new Lodi Energy Center, which is a big natural gas turbine, comes online, and that is the most efficient plant built in the United States today. So there will be the efficiencies of that plant along with this dramatic reduction in natural gas, which will be partially offset by our need to buy some fairly expensive green energy. So I second, and we need a third.
I'll third.
Okay, so we have that. Next, Bob.
Thank you. Then one last thing. This can be a written report to the council. I'd just like to see if we can get a report on the savings that the city has experienced over the past 2 years with the 960 plan. We've had several of our employees utilize the 960 plan. I believe it could be, again, upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've saved, but I'd just like to formalize that with a written report to the council. Thank you. And I'll need a second and a third.
Do you want that just as a memo? Okay, yeah, you don't need that. Just call it a memo. Okay. So that's good for a memo, and we don't need the whole deal. Okay, next, Councilmember Starbuck.
Very quickly, I just want to say that I did attend the formation of the Economic Development Committee, and I have great faith that it's going to move forward very well. Another event that I attended that I particularly like every year, and I hope the money goes to a great cause again this year, was the hay bales and cocktails. Wait till next year, and the whiskey sours.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. I also attended those two events for our Economic Development Commission meeting. It was pretty intense, but I think it went really well. Hay bales and cocktails was great. I'm really excited to hear how much money they raised, so that was a lot of fun. I actually do have a request for an agenda item, so I would need a second and third on that. Just as you folks went back and kind of heard something from your committees and brought it back, I'm doing the same thing. So as a Community Services Policy Committee member with the League of California Cities, there was a motion that was on the floor and it was passed to ask that every commission member on this committee at least attempt compliance with the motion, which was participation in a certain campaign. It's called the Heal Cities Campaign. So HEAL, Healthy Eating Active Living Cities Campaign. It's a fully funded campaign by Kaiser. There's some really great resources. I already took this to the Healthy Lompoc Coalition group, LVCHO, and got, of course, tremendous support from that side of things. We already do a lot of what is what is meant to be part of that campaign, but ultimately what happens is you do get some notoriety for being part of it. If you get to a certain level, they actually will do free marketing for you in certain magazines and things like that. So really it's just something else as far as economic development is concerned when you're talking about businesses wanting to come in and how healthy and active your community is. So I would be interested in somebody, I can probably contact the folks from that campaign and have somebody probably even show up to do a presentation, or if not, at least, get staff up to snuff on what's going on and really talk about this as a priority, because when you're looking at something like this and the war on tobacco 20 years ago, a lot of what affected that was policy, not just programmatically from nonprofits on the outside. Really, policy makes a big difference. And again, it's timely because some of it has to do with your priorities in the general plan, walkability, bikeability, things like that. So I was hoping that I could get a second and a third and have that put on the agenda.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is that something that the Healthy Lompoc Coalition could be the spearhead on? Because they were very effective on a couple other things.
Yeah, Judy Taggart has already heard of this program, and her and I have been in talks about it. They were planning on at the very least, formulating a letter. Because it's its own independent campaign, I would like to have them kind of come in and do a piece. But I'm sure that I could get them, Healthy Lompoc Coalition, to work on this as well, sort of in coordination with the city.
Rather than agenda, you just want to have a presentation then?
A presentation would be okay, but really what it's asking for is a resolution. I mean, it's not just information, it's about taking action.
Resolution of support.
Right. And in that resolution, the attempt is to delineate what future actions you want to take. So it's not just saying it's a priority, but really what are the actions you're going to take to make it a priority.
And you're going to carry the ball on this, right?
Of course.
Okay.
So
I don't know if I'm the second or the third.
I will certainly support it, and I will second that. And particularly, I would like to mention that in the general plan update, there was a health component to it, and it is there. So now that we're revising the general plan update, I think it is very much pertinent to discuss this and have the council, if the council decides to do so, have a resolution and dictate, basically specify a very specific policy that could actually reinforce what is already in the general plan update. So I'm certainly seconding to have it as an agenda item.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Martner, your report.
I don't have anything to report.
Okay, I passed.
Did you give me the third on that one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And he gave you the fourth. I think Bob was, he wants the fifth. There are two things. Number one, I put it in the list of things, but my intention is to have a little State of the City report at the next council meeting, and technically it's an agenda item, so I just prefer that you all agree that I can go ahead and do that, if you don't mind.
Mr. Mayor, did you say a little State of the City report?
Yeah, that should be 2.5, 3 hours, not that big a deal. No, we've walked down Ocean. We've taken that trip, so I think the goal will be to talk about just briefly where we've been, but more importantly where we're going. So for that, I would just as soon have a second and a third.
Second.
Okay, third.
As long as it's brief, I third it.
I promise I won't take you down H Street. And then secondly, now that you got going on the healthy thing, disc golf has kind of taken off, and a group came together and started talking to both Dirk and I, and then we started talking to each other. And so I arranged for them to, they're putting it out now. They're going to have a get-together to form a committee, and the word escapes me. A league, there we go. And that will be next Wednesday at 7 at the Chamber of Commerce office. So if any of you out there in TV land would like to get involved in the disc golf, and there are several objectives. Number one is to form a league, and number two is try to put in some more golf courses. Because one of the members from back east said, hey, I know how they did it back there. So
that was actually going to be my question for you. Are they talking about that back nine? Because I know he had presented that.
Yeah, they're talking about, actually they're a little further beyond that now. They were talking about the back nine and another 9 or 18, wherever, there's adequate space around town for it. And I think Councilmember Starbuck got him fired up because he was talking about all the people that were out there, and then everybody's been out there, so good things. I don't know if I can learn to play, though, but we'll try. I've got the disc.
I wasn't very good.
Yeah, I wasn't very good either. It's a long time ago. Yeah, then you know, Councilman Martin, you can probably get the donkey to retrieve discs. Okay, that's everything. Is there any other announcements from anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn to the Lompoc City Council meeting at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14th. Thank you for your time.